so that we have enough folks on the line. So if you want to just scroll through, and I'm assuming we might want to start 9:02, 9:03.
That makes sense to me.
Okay.
Celeste, yeah, let's give it a couple minutes.
Great, wonderful.
You know, just at 9 now, so.
Exactly, yeah. Okay.
I don't know, Melissa, you can help. Yeah, and I know Lindsay's on the line as well, helping to track where we are in terms of attendance, just based on the names so far.
Right.
People, and you know, sometimes people are calling in, so when we do the roll call, we'll have a even better sense. But
And just so everyone knows, the recording started right at 9, so we are officially recording, and I'm seeing our members joining here now.
I see some staff. Hello, staff. Hey, Chief Teague.
Good morning to those of you who are already on the phone or are joining. We're just giving a couple moments of pause before we begin so that we can have more folks on the line when we do roll call.
Why don't we get started?
Wonderful. Okay, well, good morning, everyone. I'd like to call to order the December 10th meeting of the Youth Development Council. This may or may not be our last virtual meeting. My guess is it is not our last, but we will see what the future shall hold. I appreciate you all calling in from your offices, bedrooms, living rooms, whatnot, and just want to normalize the fact that we're holding this meeting during a pandemic, and we recognize that there might be children, dogs, housemates that wander through, and that's the state of where we're at. We'd like to begin today's meeting with a new practice. It's not new around Oregon and around the world, but it's new to us, and I'm honored to begin this morning with a land acknowledgement. So I'm going to pause for a moment and just read a statement. I'd like to acknowledge the many tribes and bands who call Oregon their ancestral territory and honor the ongoing relationship between the land, plants, animals, and people indigenous to this place we now call home. We recognize the continued sovereignty of the 9 federally recognized tribes who have ties to this place and the subsequent bands within those tribes, and thank them for continuing to teach us how we might all be here together. So it's a pleasure for me to welcome you today and to have you here. I also want to just note For any guests who are on the line, today is one of the quarterly meetings of the Youth Development Council, and so this is a public meeting. This meeting is being recorded, and this meeting is a meeting of the council members. So we always begin with a roll call, and during the agenda, we will invite staff or invite others to speak. But if you are a member of the public, we have some times on the agenda where we pause and we invite you as a member of the public to share. So just want to begin with that. It's a little different than a typical meeting, but this is standard format for a public meeting. And I don't know yet if we have any members of the public on the phone. Well, let's go ahead and begin with the roll call. Melissa, are you prepared?
I am prepared. Thank you, Celeste. And we have had several members of the public join us, so welcome. And here is the roll call for the council members. Pamela Abernethy.
Here. Here.
Janet Ahrens. Jaime Arredondo.
Here.
Zan Ojero.
Here.
Aisha Berry. If Aisha is here, I can't hear you, but I will check the attendance list later on. Eric Cardella.
Here.
Marissa Chanrami. All right. Again, if you're here, you're muted. I will check later. Janine Hartley.
Here.
Alicia Hayes. Celeste Jansen. Here.
Here.
Lisa Kurzmarzik. Andy Leonard.
Here.
Hey, Melissa.
Yes.
The Lisa Kuzmarzik, I see Christina and I both had I know who Lisa is, but I don't think, unless I'm wrong, Lisa's on our council officially. She does work closely with Christina but Sandy's shaking her head, so I just want to check that one.
Goodness, thank you for letting me know. Okay.
Right.
Hold on.
It's the member, not Lisa. And there's maybe a couple others that, like Tabiti's staff person is also on there as a contact, but it's not a council member.
Perfect.
All right, thank you. Sorry about that. Let's see, we are at Christina McMahon.
Here.
Maricela Ortega Guzman.
Here.
Destiny Ortiz. Jeff Parker.
Good morning, Melissa. Jeff Parker is present.
Thank you, Jeff. Molly Rogers.
I'm present, thank you.
Diana Rojas.
Good morning. Here.
Good morning. Karen Spencer.
Here.
John Teague.
Right here.
Liz Thorne.
I'm here. Good morning.
And Koi Vu.
I'm here, thank you.
We also have two ex officio officers that I want to take roll for. Sam Coe.
Sam is here.
And Nakia Daniels. Great, that's it, Celeste. Thank you, everyone.
Hey, Melissa, I feel like, and maybe when we were figuring out the Lisa Kuzmarzik thing, there were three that I'm not sure I heard. Andy Leonard.
Andy is present.
Oh, great. Adrian Livingston, did you do those?
Yep, Adrian is present.
Great, and okay. Thanks.
Oh, and
Tabiti.
And Tabiti, sorry, Tabiti Lewis.
It sounds like Thabiti is not here, but we'll see if he comes
Yeah.
up.
I just want to say thank you for being here. And if you can please make sure that you're muted for sound quality, because we have 39 folks on the call, it's important that we can have high quality sound. I think there's someone who's calling in who is not muted, and we want to make sure to minimize feedback. Melissa, regarding the quorum, do we have, we do have a quorum today?
Yes, we do have a quorum. Happy to report.
Okay, great. For those of you who are a member of the public and who are on the call with us, you can listen throughout the meeting. If there is a time when you'd like to make a public statement, when we allow public statements, if you can send a note via chat to Melissa, then she'll know to call on you during the public comment section. So just a note, Melissa, is that right? Should they send the note to you, or would you like them to send them to Lindsay?
They can send them to Lindsay. She's keeping an eye on the chat. Thanks for checking.
Great. Okay, wonderful. So please go ahead and send a note to Lindsay if you'd like to have public comment. Okay, so let's go ahead. Yeah.
Just real quick, probably worth noting that Parasa and Destiny also seem to have joined. So.
Okay, wonderful. Welcome. We're glad to have you here. Great. So it's time now to begin with the first item on the agenda, and that's the director's report. So I'd like to welcome Brian to begin.
Thank you, Celeste. Yeah, welcome to the virtual quarterly meeting. My second, excited to be here. We've got a pretty full agenda, and I have some things I wanted to report on. I sent an update to the council, I'd say is about a month ago, and it's my goal to send you kind of monthly updates. Except in those months when we have a quarterly meeting, this will serve as the December update. So just wanted to hit some of the high points of that update. And then after I go over each sort of section of the update, I will certainly be open to any questions. And since we're a couple minutes ahead of time, I think we expect this to go for 20, 30 minutes at most. So I'll jump into it. First, I do want to acknowledge Sandy. This is Sandy's last quarterly meeting as an unretired person. She will be retiring officially at the end of the month. We know that in September, we also were able to acknowledge Sandy for her contributions when she was going out on leave, but this will be her last official quarterly meeting. So I see people adding notes in the chat. Congratulations to Sandy. And I just wanted to thank Sandy for her contributions to the division, to the council, to our work. And I will tell you all, just so you're aware, we will probably have some of Sandy's time maybe early in the new year. I'm making arrangements to just have her be available for a few hours in each month, and at least probably January, February in retirement. Folks who are in retirement are able to work a few hours. And so Sandy's just got such a wealth of knowledge that we felt like even in the early part of the new year, we might have some needs or will have some needs. And so Sandy's graciously said that she would be available. So though this is the official goodbye and into retirement, I know I will stay connected to Sandy in that regard. So I don't know if Sandy, do you want to say any words?
Oh, well, thanks, Brian. I've really enjoyed getting to know you and working with you council members, and the work that YDDA is extremely important. And I think with the new re-engagement work, we're off to a great start, so just continue the great work that you guys all do, and thanks for all your support.
Thanks, Sandy. Next, I want to quickly mention that you all know that Melissa joined us in late September. Melissa is our council administrator. So know that communication around meetings, around terms, around other needs related to subcommittees is information that for the most part will be coming from her. I'm sure there will be occasions where you'll hear from other staff or staff who are involved with the committees, but she is our official council administrator. So we're excited to have Melissa on in that regard, and know that you probably have seen some meeting cancellations from Sandy's account. And if you haven't already, you'll probably see quarterly meeting invitations from Melissa. So be sure to pay attention to your calendar, pay attention to your email, and know that the majority of the communication will be coming from Melissa. And that if, again, as you're indicating your attendance at meetings and so on, those will be invitations from Melissa. Melissa, do you want to say any quick words?
Just that I'm very happy to be here, and it's really nice to see everyone's faces after just, seeing your names on lists of things. So thank you. Happy to be here.
Great. Thanks, Melissa. And then before the other quick thing, I just want to say a big thank you to staff. A lot of members of our staff, obviously Sandy and Melissa, but many other folks are on the line, and you will be hearing reports from various staff members today. So just from me, I want to say thanks to the staff who put in a lot of work to get us prepared for today's meeting, and to be as focused on the decisions and approvals that we need to do, and just on the other information that needs to be shared. Specifically, the land acknowledgement piece was something that staff, Sanji Moore advocated for, and Jared played a role in helping to put that together. And of course, big thanks to Andy Leonard, one of our council members, who was instrumental in getting the language refined and finalized. So big thanks to Andy for that. So just know that staff are making some really great contributions, and you'll hear more from them today. That's the kind of the housekeeping stuff. Wanted to jump into information around our governor's recommended budget, share some information about our legislative priorities and some emerging policy goals and strategies. Just talk about a few meetings that we've had over the last few months, and then a couple of other points, one around secure facility inspections, just a quick update there. So those are the topics I'm going to hit today. And then again, after each section, I'll be available for some quick questions. So the thing that I want to get to first is the governor's recommended budget, because I think there's a lot of good news for the Youth Development Division. And at the same time, I want to acknowledge that the overarching state budget, and I think we'll probably see public sector budgets on the whole, are going to be challenged in this environment, right, where so many of us are experiencing challenges related to the pandemic and wildfires. So know that there's, though YDD, I think our budget's looking good, and I feel like the investments and the prioritization that the governor has made is critical in this time when young people are experiencing quite a bit of disconnection and marginalization, as you might imagine, particularly those most vulnerable. So in September, just a quick, by way of quick background, right? In September, agency directors were asked to prepare and submit their initial budgets. Those initial budgets did include a 10% a potential reduction for the 2021 to 2023 biennium. So I submitted that reduced budget, and still, had the following goals in mind around prioritizing serving youth and communities in need, operating with greater efficiency, and doing our best to maintain our current staff. So that budget was submitted. It's a multi-step process. We're now several months in now, right, where we're to the point where the governor has released her recommended budget, and I'll again highlight some key points from that. That was released about a couple weeks ago. Now, the legislature will make the final decision around the state budget. So that budget, that process, right, will get going in the, in the beginning of the year and through the legislative session. So there's still work and negotiation to be done. So by no means is this whole budget process finalized. But again, I just wanted to provide a kind of quick overview of what is in the governor's recommended budget as it relates to the Youth Development Division, and a little bit about what is recommended for education, right, and kind of youth services more broadly. Our budget, the YDD general fund piece in particular, is intact. And in fact, as we did the math, and Cord, you can help me, I think our initial analysis was that our actual budget is increasing by about 4%. We're for the next biennium, to be clear, right? We're looking at in the governor's recommended budget, full funding for our organ re-engagement system work. So the $8.3 million is in the budget, in the Student Success Act portion of the budget. And so we're really happy that even a minor reduction, right? Like we thought maybe they might take a little off the top and adjust for inflation or something and give us 8.2, but it's 8.3 and so far. We're also seeing that some of the funding that was reduced in the special session this last summer has been restored. Again, we'll see how that shakes out through the spring, but there is restored funding for gang prevention and intervention work, and also for community schools. So we're excited that in the next biennium, should all of this pass through the legislature, that we'll be able to continue the grants in those areas at the levels that we've done in the past. And then the other key point, I think, is that the funding for the positions, there's some restructuring that we have been looking at doing, and to be very transparent, that some of this has to do with the fact that with Sandy's retirement, we wanted to rethink how we use the funds from the chief of staff position. And so, but we also have some other internal positions that we're thinking of moving around. But all in all, at least in the governor's recommended budget and what we believe we'll be able to do, we will make our racial and ethnic disparities coordinator position permanent, want to create a policy and communications director or manager role in terms of our staff. That would mean we wouldn't have a chief of staff, but we'll have somebody focused on policy and legislative efforts. And then also we saw in the budget that one of the positions which we thought was initially reduced, but actually has been restored, as a re-engagement admin role. So staffing is looking the way that I'm hoping to, at least the funds for the staffing that I'm hoping to create and or maintain is looking really positive. So that's the quick overview of things for our YDD budget. Are there any questions from the council? I'm looking in the chat. I see Cord made a comment that that folks can all read. Cord, is there anything else that you want to add based on the fact that you've been in some of those conversations with me related to our budget?
No, just that I think we're really pleased with the outcome of our appeal and with the governor's recommendations.
Yeah. Thanks, Cord. So I'm going to move us forward so that we can keep moving. I know folks are excited to be talking about re-engagement awards, so I want to make sure we have ample time for that. One of the things that I've mentioned in my updates is that I've been participating as a member of the governor's overall education cabinet, and the members of the education cabinet have been presenting to a group that the governor has organized, and it's called the Education Recovery Committee. And that committee is a committee of the Governor's Racial Justice Council. Just wanted to quickly note that I've had the opportunity to present to that group, and that group I think has got lots of information about what YDD is and what YDD is doing, and I think help to inform the governor's recommended budget. So I think those presentations in the fall were really helpful in framing the importance of the work we're doing, and then I think help translate into seeing some of our priorities maintained in the governor's budget. But just as a quick reminder, the ERC, the Education Recovery Committee, the group to which I was reporting and sharing information earlier, its priority was to recommend to provide recommendations for the public education system recovery, right, in the midst of the pandemic and the fires and so much going on, and also push for improvement in racial justice and inclusion. The committee was specifically focused on elevating goals, policies, and proposals for the 2021 and 2021 to 23 biennial budget and beyond, right? There's, I think, a lot of work that is longer term to advance access, opportunity, and outcomes for youth of color, tribal youth, and other vulnerable populations and communities. And I was able to share some of our strategies and thinking, and those were really, again, helpful, I think, for me in terms of how we are pushing forward on some of our strategic planning, and also informing some of the specific policy concepts that we still have on the table for consideration. And there are two specific policy concepts that we're pushing for. One is, and they're not totally technical, but frankly more on the technical side. One is a legislative concept to expand the re-engagement age, the re-engagement age eligibility from 21 to 24, and then also make some additional technical fixes. And then the other LC legislative concept is to update and remove some outdated information related to the Youth Development Council and Division. So those are, we have two LCs. I mean, it's not a long list. You imagine with other agencies, there are longer lists, but I think those are things which will be advanced as agency bills in the coming legislative session. More probably on that as we get into that, but just wanted to quickly note those things as a couple of policy priorities. Cord, anything else on that? No? Any questions from the council? I'll also then hit a couple other things. In the governor's overall recommended budget, I think it's important to note the following, that when she released that budget a couple weeks ago, she centered equity and justice and really prioritized education. Some priorities in the budget that if you haven't looked at it, just to give you a quick overview, expand access to preschool and early care and education settings, fund the state school fund, if not expand, transform the way our K-12 system is funded, fully fund the student investment account of the Student Success Act, which is actually where our re-engagement dollars are, bring the community college support fund to current service level, if not expand, bring the public university college support fund to current service level, fund access to affordability to post-secondary education. Those are just a few highlights from the budget. I encourage you all to take a close look. Some other things that I think are on the horizon for YDD. We've had some initial discussions. I see that Nakia threw in a chat what she asked about the second LC, which was updating statutes and removing outdated information related to the Youth Development Council and Youth Development Division. Hey, Cord, do you want to say anything else about that second LC?
Just the statutory changes, Elsie?
Yeah.
Yeah, so just quickly, it corrects our statute to refer to the council as the state advisory group for the Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Act. I think right now it says state advisory committee, so it's just aligning the language with the federal requirement. It also, there's kind of a partner LC with OIA. There was some language that I think when the council was created, there were old statutes that had to be divided between OIA and the YDC, and some things got flipped around that had been pointed out to us by a juvenile director and something we had noted for correction. And so this statute will actually correct which funds we administer. So it says, it will say that the juvenile crime prevention funding will be the purview of the YDC, and that we will collaborate with OIA on the funding that they distribute and vice versa. So it's just sort of a corrective for a couple of things related to the juvenile justice side of the work.
Thanks, Cord. I want to highlight one or two quick kind of emerging policy goals. So these aren't things that are specific legislative concepts, but are just things that we're going to be, I think, thinking about as we move forward. One is around the sort of, I'll call it sort of the work-based learning continuum and work-based learning pathways. We are have had an initial conversation with the Office of Workforce Investments at the Higher Education Coordinating Council, the HEC as it's referred to, and some other partners about doing our best to align our kind of workforce and re-engagement investments with the work that the Office of Workforce Investments does. There is a specific, I think it's a POP, a policy option package, to create or to invest in the creation of an Oregon Youth Employment Program. And so that's something that the HEC has proposed in the past, and there's a statute related to this already, but funding hasn't yet come to fruition. But it looks like in the governor's recommended budget, there's about 11.8, nearly $12 million a request for the development of this youth employment program. So we're really both excited about that potential, and also want to ensure again that there's real good alignment between our work and the Office of Workforce Investments at the HEC. So more to come on that, but that's one thing that we're tracking pretty closely and having some continued conversation about. The other idea, and this came up I think at the Juvenile Justice Committee meeting earlier this week, is looking closely at the work around gang prevention intervention, and just thinking about how we both describe and frame that work, knowing that we're talking about youth, the causes and root causes of youth violence, harm, and trauma, and just wanting to both acknowledge that there's I think a different kind of framing, almost a public health framing, that is important to note. There's, I think, juvenile justice implications, accountability implications, as you all know, prevention work that I think YDD has been funding for years. So just know that that's a conversation we're eager to continue to have with within the committee, within the council, and within other venues around the state. And having, frankly, even had some conversations with the OJJDP at the federal level about resources to help us think about gang prevention, gang violence, youth violence prevention, and planning. So there's, I think, just an opportunity for us to reframe and revisit the language. We want to continue the funding, that's for sure, but also to advance the conversation. I think part of that motivation is that, right, we saw in the special session that there was that the gang prevention intervention money was reduced. Again, in the governor's recommended budget, it's been restored, but I think there's a broader kind of misunderstanding and a lack of understanding around what we really mean, and the idea that we are doing gang work, I think sometimes can be misconstrued. So interested in pushing that. Any questions or comments about those ideas?
Ryan, I have a question. I know that, I know that in a typical year, the governor's recommended budget is one that is just that. It is a recommendation, and then the legislature makes their recommended budget, and there's a lot of negotiation that happens, and so often the final budget looks nothing like the governor's recommended budget. I'm curious because we have a Democratic, the governor is a Democrat, and we have a Democratic House and Senate. If we anticipate there will be more alignment with the past, with the budget that's eventually passed with the governor's recommended budget. So, you know, I'm just curious, for those of you who have a lot of experience in this, is that just fortune telling and we have no idea, or do we feel pretty good about the things that we've seen are things that we will anticipate actually seeing when the outcome is there?
Love the question, Celeste. Council members, how would you respond?
I think that it's a roadmap, but certainly not a recipe. And I think that because of the requirement to balance the budget, there are things in this budget that will not happen. I would be very surprised if we closed 3 prisons, and that's part of what balances this budget. So there will probably be more cuts elsewhere. And it's, you know, with the membership of the legislature, there'll be little squabbles everywhere, and hopefully not any big walkouts. That's the main thing.
Appreciate that, Commissioner. Thanks.
Yeah, this is Cohen. The only thing I would like to add to is that there's advocates and lobbyists that have special interests, and a lot of community organizations, our organization is one of them, have vested interest in a lot of the recommended budgets line items that the governor has proposed. And like what Brian mentioned, with the influence of the Racial Justice Council, I have been incredibly impressed with this budget in particular, of the governor centering communities of color, immigrants and refugees, youth, children and family services, as well as health programs as well, and that there's, you know, components of it that that may be challenged by other lobbyists or challenged by legislators. But I think that there's a very strong alignment in legislation, especially in a Democratic majority legislative council as well. So there's definitely challenges, and that there's never a guarantee. But there's advocates that are working very hard throughout the legislative sessions, community members that are working very hard, lobbyists that are working very hard to make sure that we balance the budget with a racial justice, racial equity lens moving forward for the next biennium. So I'm confident that it will look strong. Well, I'm optimistic that the budget actually will turn out as it is proposed, or very close to what it is proposed.
Thanks.
If I may too, also for everybody's benefit, the co-chairs come out with their proposed budget as well. And so once that comes out, that'll really give you an idea of what they're looking at moving forward. I mean, I apologize, I can't recall the time frame on when that comes out, but I think it's closer to when session starts.
And I also want to add, a lot of it's also education as well. So there's you know, areas or components in regards to the different budgets or legislative concepts that require just additional education to, you know, to the Senate, to House of Representatives. And so that's also, I think, a lot of work that we can do together, is to continue to educate those who are in position of influence to really understand how this money, how these line items or these changes in legislation can actually impact community and actually improve the overall either financial makeup in the long term for our communities and in Oregon, or for for individual specific communities themselves.
Thank you. Parasa, I see your face, like maybe you have something to add.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, I wanted to just second everything that Zan, Coy, and Sandy were sharing. The other thing I would add is the session is going to be virtual, so learning more about what that process is going to look like and how to engage folks on the advocacy side, representing agencies, folks representing different interests, are all trying to navigate this uncharted territory. So I think, you know, even though a lot is unknown, there's a lot of great opportunity in getting to know. Roughly 20% of our lawmakers are brand new to their positions as well. And so to Coy's point, there's a lot of education to be done. There's an opportunity there. I think the more we can be proactive with meeting with electeds earlier so that they have that background knowledge and understand how impactful these critical investments are and how we're centering racial justice and equity. I think that the groundwork we lay there will be critical as we prepare for the session.
Thanks. Thanks, Parsa. Yeah. Well, that actually is probably a good segue to the next thing I wanted to cover, and that is just to highlight a few meetings that that I've been having, really to share information about the division and the council and about our work. As a new director, it's also been important for me to introduce myself, but just wanted to highlight that I think we're starting and interested in doing some of those that education that Parsa just helped outline, as well as Coy and Zan and Sandy. So just to quickly highlight, we've had meetings with Representative Susan McLean, Senator Michael Dembrow, Representative Teresa Alonso-Leon, who's the chair of the House Interim Committee on Education, Representative Raquel Moore-Green, who I think is a relatively new legislator, Representative Rob Noss, and Senator Kathleen Taylor. And so those are folks we've met with within the legislature so far, and are hopeful to continue that, to continue to do more meetings. And we're just kind of sharing an overview of the Youth Development Division and Council, talking quickly about our priorities, which are getting, you know, in so far, the governor's recommended budget is really helping us realize those priorities around the reengagement funding, around those legislative concepts, which I mentioned earlier. And then also just saying, you know, we're also wanting to align and do that critical interagency work, right, around workforce, as one example, which I mentioned earlier. So we're highlighting those things and then having good conversations. And frankly, we just had a conversation, Court and I did last week around with Senator Kathleen Taylor, and, you know, had an interesting conversation about homelessness, homeless youth, which was a real passion for her, and homelessness more generally, and also the whole idea of gang involvement. And I thought helped provide a little education about kind of how to think about what, you know, youth violence prevention and intervention is, and the power. So just a quick mention there. Also throw out that we've had some additional meetings with Danny Santos, the interim director for the Legislative Commission on Indian Services. And as you might recall, Serena was serving as the chair of the Public Safety Cluster. So Danny and I are continuing some conversations about how I can be supportive for a meeting in 2021, met with Rebecca Jones-Gaston, the Child Welfare Director at Oregon DHS, Matthew Rasmussen, who is the coordinator for runaway and homeless youth. Again, another place where he's in another agency, but the critical overlap, right, for our young people who are runaways or status offenders or whatever that looks like, is important for us to be connected. So those are some meetings we've had lately. Any questions about those? Since we're almost at 9:45, I'm going to wrap it up and just mention that, and you saw this in my update, that we've been in conversation with the federal folks at OJJDP around our visit compliance required facility inspections for compliance, and we're looking really at and pursuing kind of as many virtual visits as we can during the pandemic. So Ryan's working hard on that, and we've got a bunch of visits to complete by next September. So just know that we're moving forward with the facility visit piece, but doing so virtually. Want to make sure we keep our staff safe and also comply with governor's orders around working remotely. So just that's the quickest and fastest of updates there. I noted in my update too that there are a bunch of conferences that staff continue to attend and be a part of and make presentations at, and juvenile justice and racial justice, and there was a recent tribal government to government summit that we participated in. So we're staying active, and just kudos to council and staff and others who are helping ensure that YDD space is out there at a statewide level and frankly at a national level as well. So any final questions from me on the director's report?
Yeah, I just want to echo, thank you for that, Brian. There was a comment in the chat. Okay. I recognize that all of this work that's happening is happening virtually, and it has to be done creatively. And so I appreciate that's a lot of work, and I'm assuming that was a lot of Zoom calls. So I appreciate that we're making some really nice headway and great relationships are forming. If there are no other questions, I'm going to just check the chat. Okay, great. So next item on the agenda, I'd like to invite Paul Sell to lead us through some information. Thanks, Paul.
Absolutely, thanks, Celeste. I actually had the pleasure of talking about the Oregon Youth Reengagement Fund today and moving some recommended awardees forward to the council. So just as we get started, Melissa will be pulling up a document for us to guide off of, but just a couple things to note as we head into this conversation. I have to admit, joining YDD almost 7 months ago, it's been an adventure getting to this point. My wife even made a comment yesterday of how exciting I was at this point to move this work forward. The last 2 weeks has been kind of a whirlwind, but it is super exciting to see the amazing work that's happening throughout Oregon right now and the adaptations that people have been doing because of COVID and all the other work, and to see people take time to apply for the re-engagement grant applications was really cool. And I think the process in general, from just being a part of a lot of the team meetings, I think people felt really solid about the process itself. I think we've learned some things that we were doing pretty well in this process, some new things that we brought on that I think people liked, but also, and just for me as well as the process in general, I think we've learned a few things that we want to improve on next time. So I like to just acknowledge that as we're moving forward, that work is coming. Being very transparent, that work is truly forthcoming. Once we get forward with the grants recommendations, surveys are kind of the next piece on my to-do list to reach out to the reviewers and the applicants to kind of see what they thought of the process. So that's to come on that. Just a couple things about the applications in general. Really wide array of different programs and ways to connect youth back to education. It was exciting to see that. One of the things that I know that we've talked a lot about is about areas outside of just kind of the I-5 corridor. And we saw some really innovative and creative ideas coming from all of the priority regions on that side. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. You know, we do have some areas we want to keep focusing on. Obviously, re-engagement is driven by getting youth connected back to their high school completion, whether it be credits or GED. So that's going to continue to be some of that work. And I think that was some of the questions that we saw in some of the applicants as well, of like, how do we enhance this? How do we make this stronger? And then also the eligible youth. It's a difficult population in general to bring back into school. Hence why we have re-engagement funds that we're putting out there, right? So I think that's going to continue to be a focus, and we saw that in the applications for it. Just a little bit of my role when we went through these applications. I was really a facilitator to coordinate all of the work. And so one of the things that I noticed about the applications themselves that I think Cord and I are actually talking about it this morning, is that we want to do a little bit more of a summary intro, so we have a little bit more detail versus reading the 15 to 20 page application that they submitted, to be able to update kind of that work out there. But it was broad in terms of the work itself. We saw different ideas around using technology to using culturally interpretive dance and culturally specific programming to re-engage youth. So pretty exciting when you think about the variety of work out there on it. So kind of getting ready to just jump into the PowerPoint. So Melissa, if you want to pull that screen up, a couple notes that I know that
Paul,
go ahead
real quick. I know that we want to, Cord is going to make a quick mention around conflict of interest before we do the sharing. So Cord, do you want to?
Yes. Thank you for reminding me.
Thanks. And yeah, no, sorry, Paul. I noticed that the order in our annotated meeting had the conflict of interest statement coming after the presentation, and I actually want to go ahead and cover this now, so that everyone knows exactly how this works. So I'm actually going to be reading, this is language from the statutes on conflict of interest. So we want to get this out now for anyone who is aware of a real or potential conflict, and I will talk about what that means in just a minute. If you are not aware, but when you review the document, you notice an organization on the document that would present for you a real or a potential conflict, you can also announce your conflict once we get to the voting stage if you aren't aware of it now. So I'll just go ahead and read the language. When a potential conflict of interest exists, the member will announce publicly the nature of the potential conflict prior to taking any action thereon in the capacity of a public official, or announce publicly the nature of the actual conflict and refrain from participating as a public official in any discussion or debate on the issue out of which the actual conflict arises, or from voting on the issue. If any public official's vote is necessary to meet a requirement of a minimum number of votes to take official action, but eligible to vote, this is some confusing statutory language. Let me read it before I try to read it aloud. I will read it like it's written. If any public official's vote is necessary to meet a requirement of a minimum number of votes to take official action, be eligible to vote, but not to participate as a public official in any discussion or debate on the issue out of which the actual conflict arises. When a public official gives notice of an actual or potential conflict of interest, the public body shall record the actual or potential conflict in the official records of the public body. And I don't actually see the language defining an actual or potential conflict. All this can be found in ORS 244.120. But I will note that an actual conflict would be one where you are aware of a conflict on your part or on the part of anyone in your family. And a potential conflict is where you suspect there may be a conflict, but you are not completely certain of the conflict. And of course, we did a training on the ethics from the Ethics Commission probably now about a year ago, which you can refer to those materials as well. And so we just wanted to share that now is a good time, if you are aware of any actual or potential conflict, that you can announce it and we'll record that. And as we move into the discussion about this process, we would ask that you refrain from participating in the discussion or debate on this issue.
This is Janine Hartley. I have a conflict with all applications from the Southwest region because of where I work and my living in a small town and everybody knowing everybody.
Thanks, Janine.
Hey, Cord and Brian, Jeff Parker here. I have a conflict of interest on an application from the Twin Rivers Charter School, which is a program of the Northwest Youth Corps. So I'll be abstaining from any vote on that particular applicant or any discussion about it.
Thanks, Jeff.
Brian, this is Molly Rogers. I have what I believe is a perceived conflict of interest, or a perceived, I don't have any financial incentive, but I am a board member of the Central and Eastern Oregon Juvenile Justice Consortium's application.
Yeah. Thanks, Molly.
Hi, this is Coy. I have a conflict with an organization that applied, the Immigrant Refugee Community Organization, which is my employer, as well as perceived conflict with Open School, which is a former employer.
Thanks, Coy.
Hi, Brian, what I'd add, this is Parsa. I think I have a perceived conflict with any of the school districts that are applying, just because I represent a membership organization in my professional role. So wanted to add that to the record.
Thanks, Parsa.
So I have, I guess this is a process question. We have two different RFAs and grant awards that we're going to be talking about. I believe in the past, we've sometimes ratified different grant awards separately. And so I guess my question is, would we ratify severe and opportunity grants? Would we do those separately, and would folks in the past, if your conflict was in one of the specific categories but not the other, you were able to vote? I just want to check and see if we would ask that folks who've declared a conflict, are we doing a single slate of all the awards, or right out the two awards?
Okay, Cord, I'm going to ask you to pause just for a second. We do have we have a guest on the phone who is unmuted. So I want to see if that guest needs to chime in here. Or if I just
Yeah, Melissa, I'm wondering if either the host or the co-host can hover their button and mute that guest.
Absolutely.
That
I
would
just
be
want to make sure they didn't need to weigh in on something.
great. And Cord, the audio was going in and out when you said that. Would you mind saying your statement one more time? I had a hard time hearing. I'm not sure if anyone else did. It might have just been my audio.
Okay, I'll try again. And I don't know if it was my audio, but am I coming through clearly now? Okay, great. So my question was, we have two different RFAs that we're going to be discussing. And in the past, we've sometimes taken votes separately on each specific type of grant. And if an individual had a conflict for a grant within one slate but not the other, sometimes they would abstain from discussion of the different slates. My sense is we're presenting this all as one set of grants, and I don't know whether we would separate the two different types of grants for two different votes, or if they would all be voted for to ratify our recommendations as a whole. And I just wanted to clarify that in case that means that folks would abstain from one vote from not the other, or just abstain from a single vote. And sorry, it's a bit technical, but I realize as we're talking about this that's something I'm not actually sure how we want to proceed with.
That's a great question. What we might want to do, since we do have quite a few folks that have conflicts of interest, is handle each vote separately rather than handle them together, so that we can focus on one and focus on the other. I think that sounds good. I just like to pause and ask if there are any other council members that have a strong feeling about that one way or the other. Sam, yeah, I see.
I just wanted to add that I also have to announce a conflict of interest with the Reengagement Opportunity Grant for Community Services Consortium. I am this year the chair of that entity, And although the funds are slated for Polk County and not Benton, it's at least a perceived conflict of interest. I think we should take them separately. I think we're going to run into quorum issues if we're not careful.
I agree. I think we should too. I just want to pause and ask if anyone else has any perceived. I work with a lot of nonprofit organizations and I want to be cautious myself. So I'm going to pull up the list and just look at it closely. I ask for everyone else to do so too. You have the list in your email. You can find it, Melissa sent it, and it says YDC Reengagement Award recommendations. So just want to pause.
I think Jeff has a comment, or his hand was up.
Yeah, Jeff.
Yeah, thanks, Lois. This is an important question. I think whatever strategy we choose, it's going to be a burden on who's recording the votes, but it always is, and thankfully this is recorded. We can go back and determine who voted which way. But I have seen it done in public spaces where each member can vote on the slate as presented, but abstain from an individual element in that slate. And that can move the process forward much quicker. In fact, on another screen, there's a resource advisory committee for the BLM that is using that strategy right now because they have hundreds of proposals that they're looking at for secure rural schools funding. So I think that that's an acceptable public process to use. You present the slate and every council member votes, but they abstain from an element of it if they need to.
Okay, that makes sense. That's interesting to see how that plays out. I think that Brian and staff, I'm looking to you all about the way that we should do that. That makes a lot of sense to me, but I also just wonder if there is any recommendation that you'd like to have.
Yeah, and I appreciate we want to take our time with this and do it right, but I think you're right. Jeff just said it, the recording of it. So yeah. Melissa, we've got Lindsay, we've got some staff, multiple staff to help us. Sandy's here to also weigh in if you have any advice or, precedent from the past. But if we then do one vote and let's just say theoretically we go through, and Celeste, I'm just going to, not pick on you, but mention you. Yeah. Celeste says, so I vote support, in favor, but I'm not going to vote in favor on the application from, Brian Detman's Reengagement program. So then we somehow will have to record, if I'm hearing this correctly, the yes and or no votes, the numbers or the people for each application, essentially removing a name or a yes vote from individual applications where somebody needed to abstain. Mm-hmm. I don't know, Melissa, Sandy, what do you guys think? It's a little, and we have this recorded, so we could probably track it back.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I did have a question for you, Brian. So in the past, when we've done our community investment grants, we had recommendations of those that were funded, and the council voted as a whole to fund that particular group. It wasn't on an individual organization basis. So I'm not sure if the intent is that you're going to award each individually or you're going to award them as a group. So that makes a difference, because if it's as a group, then if a person has a conflict, they can't vote on that group. The other thing that I did want to mention, it's my understanding that as long as we have a quorum present, whether or not they can vote, if they have a conflict of interest, we still have a quorum, so we do meet that threshold. They just don't vote on that which is noted on the record.
That's a good reminder, Sandy. So we're fine with quorum. Yeah. I think we vote as a group. We're gonna propose them to you, frankly, as a group. But I don't know, it's sort of marrying these things. Maybe we vote on the regional group, and then we vote on the regional Reengagement grant group, and then we vote on the opportunity, just to do those, just to essentially take 2 votes for both.
Yeah.
That
So Brian, this is
somehow
Molly.
that feels not cleaner, but at least we'll have two opportunities for your approval.
Great.
This
Molly?
is Molly. Yeah, so my understanding also is that, for example, I really appreciated the note about the counties and the governments. Mine's a perceived conflict. I needed to call it out and state it. I can still move forward, and I don't have any financial gain or any of the actual experiences in me. So I can vote on the ones that are included in the slate as a perceived. I just needed to state it.
Yeah, thank you, Molly. I think going back to when we took the conflict of interest training a year ago, a perceived means that you need to state it, but you can still vote. If you have an actual conflict of interest, then you cannot. So thank you for reminding folks. I don't know that everyone who is on the council now has had the opportunity to take that training. So it is nice for us to just walk through this. I work at Education Northwest, and Education Northwest is a consulting firm that has a ton of different work with nonprofits and with school districts. So I don't recognize any one of those grantees that are on, but I know that there is a couple potential projects that are looming. So I think it would be safest for me to also state a conflict of interest and not vote. Because we do work with quite a few organizations, and I would like to make sure to do things right as well. Okay, yeah, Zan, go ahead.
I'm just reading through Cord's notes in the chat, and as I understand that, for my position, for instance, I don't receive any monetary remuneration at all from my role on the board of Community Services Consortium. So I would, in fact, do not have an actual conflict of interest. It's only perceived. Is that a correct interpretation?
Or do you want to weigh in? I see you.
Yeah, I believe it is. Sandy actually sent that to me. That was some information we had shared prior to a past vote. And yeah, for the folks on the phone, I'll quickly summarize what I've put in the chat, which is that this was additional guidance that we received and passed on to the council. That for a business where there is a remunerative relationship, you want to announce a actual conflict of interest and abstain from discussion and action on the item. However, for governmental units, they're not legal entities operated for economic gain, do not fall within the business. Organizations that are tax exempt under 501c would not be considered businesses. And so if a council member is a relative or a relative is associated only as a member, board director, or in a non-remunerative capacity, then it would not be considered an actual conflict of interest. And so that is an important distinction that we should note there.
Great. I do have some questions then for some folks who had conflicts of interest, whether or not they were perceived or actual. So I just want to stop, have everyone read it, and if you did state anything, if you'd like to make a change to say that you're perceived or actual, I think that would be important to do so now.
To confirm, this is Janine Hartley again. To confirm, mine is an actual conflict of interest.
Okay.
For both sections of the decision making.
Okay. And with me, I think that because it's not just about funding now, but it's also funding in the immediate future, and we have lots of conversations at Education Northwest, I think I'm going to go ahead and declare an actual as well, just to be safe. Anyone else?
And this is Parasa. Since I work at COSA, the Coalition of School Administrators, and we receive membership payments from different school district administrators and schools, I think it's an actual conflict of interest for me as well. not perceived, as I stated earlier, just looking at the guidance and the list of grantees, proposed grantees.
And for the record, Celeste, Jeff Parker will confirm that it's an actual conflict of interest for the Twin Rivers Charter School application.
Okay, thank you for walking through that with us, Cord. Thank you, council members, for reviewing the list of potential grantees and thinking about your conflicts of interest. I believe, if no one has anything else to state or to declare, that we can continue with the recommendations and get on to the vote.
Oh, thank you. I have to say, Jeff, I appreciate your background picture, the NYC yellow hard hats. That's a blast from the past. I know you and Bill and I have talked about it, but that's pretty awesome. It's kind of making me happy.
It's great. I just turn around and you get this wonderful smell of the ocean.
Awesome.
Actually, it's dirty laundry and my kids doing homework, so that's
fair. My kids are too. So yeah. All right. So Melissa, if you want to go ahead and pull up, thank you, Council, for that discussion on it, and Brian for the reminder. I skipped over that part in the agenda, so thank you. All right. So I believe everybody has this slide, this PDF slide deck, but just kind of go through a couple different things with it. Before we jump into the next slide, I want to point out a couple key pieces as we kind of look at it. I know there's some questions about next steps with RFAs. That's yet to be determined in terms of what the 21-23 biennium looks like. So I want to put that out there on it. We're still in that process in terms of whether continue or reapply and all of those questions. So we're in process with that as of yet to make that decision. And then also, as you start seeing the score divides, we really did look at it mathematically, and where you see the proposed pieces, they're going to be very specific to the average score and the biggest breaks in the scoring rubric with it. The slide deck, I think, my understanding looks a little different than it has in the past, so we kind of had to adjust. There's a lot of conversation about how to make this virtually happen, so please do let me know as we move forward with questions. So Melissa, if you want to slide to the next one. You'll see here, this is just a summary of the initial grant requests, and just for acronym clarity, RRG is the regional reengagement. That is the biggest grants, and ROG is the reengagement opportunity grant applications. So you can see overall we had 147% of the grant funds requested of the 4 million available. So that's kind of a quick breakdown. We'll come back to that as we move forward with it. So Melissa, if you want to move forward, just to the next couple of slides are just a recap of the two different types of grants. So the regional reengagement grant is the largest of the two grants. Grant funding was up to $320,000 as per the RFA. Some of the application facts, 19 organizations actually went into SM Apply and reviewed the application. That's approximately, because sometimes two people from the same organization sign in and look, but we did have 9 completed applications. And 7 of the 8 priority regions were represented within that. For the opportunity grant, which is the next slide, those are the smaller of the 2 grants. We did state that we intended to award at least one of these awards in each of the priority areas. We had 52 organizations approximately that went in and viewed it, and with a total of 32 completed applications. 8 of the 8 priority regions were represented. Kind of a key note about the priority regions, especially with opportunity grants. Applicants could select multiple areas, and so all of the percentages are based off of the first pool of priority regions that every applicant submitted, and then there's second and third options that some applicants submitted. So the averages aren't exactly to this is the only area that they're doing. Another point to the priority areas is that as part of the application, the applicants defined what their priority or their service area, looked like as part of that application process. So the priority areas do adjust over the course of this process. So if you want to go ahead and move to the next slide, Melissa. These are just a reminder of the priority regions, as just to make the document as easily readable as possible. I did take out all of the counties. We defined what the the terms were and what we called each region. So you can refer back to that. That should be on that slide deck that you received this morning. All right, so I'm trying to remember what the next slide is. So anxiously waiting, Melissa moving it forward for me. So just a real quick recap on how this process and the review process went. We had some initial screenings, which was the minimum qualifications, whether they answered all the questions and submitted all the accurate information and met the priority region for the regional opportunity, and those minimum qualifications, just yes, no, as well as an initial screening on a budget review that it was complete, and they completed all portions of that work. And so that piece, there were a few clarifications for some of the applicants that came out of that section, but that's all of the totals that you saw in terms of the completed applications made it through the initial screenings. The grant application scoring was new for us, and my understanding is we've kind of evolved that process. Cord and I obviously worked pretty closely on creating that process. So this grant application scoring was done by review teams of anywhere of 5 members initially, and so the review teams were made up of a YDD staff team lead. Typically, that was who helped coordinate the team review team convening. And also it was made up of other available YDD staff, YDC non-voting members, as well as volunteers from ODE and state employee, as well as some community volunteers on each side of that. Each of those key assignments, so obviously we assigned one specific staff to each team to help run the review team convening, but that was also randomly assigned. You can see that next bullet there, randomization of reviewers and applications. So we did run every applicant, or excuse me, every assigned member or review member to the teams randomly were assigned to each team and grant, as well as each application was randomly assigned to those teams. All scores in that process, so they did an individual review process on their own, were considered preliminary leading up to the review team convening. During the review team convening, review team members didn't have to change their scores. It was just a conversation around clarity of questions. Reviewers could not reduce their scores as part of that process, but they could raise them and if they so choose through conversation. Each of the team lead YDD staff leads that led that were given a document of where the greatest variance between scores was, and those were the primary conversations. So for example, it was a 5-point scoring rubric so if there was a score of 1 and a score of 3, it was more than a 1-point deviation. So those were the key areas of conversation in that. So as part of the review process, each reviewer did have to declare a conflict of interest for each application that they reviewed. And so as part of the SM apply process or system, when they opened up a review, it would say the name, and if they had a conflict or perceived conflict of interest, they would not score that application. And so that was adjusted through that averaging of scores when that occurred. We did have to assign several backup reviewers to some teams to help balance those on that process. So Melissa, if you want to go ahead and move to the next slide. The final application scores were determined. So you can see the list of the order there, where they were submitted by individual reviewers to myself. I was not a scorer of any of the applications. I was a facilitator of this process. And so they submitted their final scores via an Excel document that they assigned and submitted to me. Once that was done, those scores were loaded and weighted. The weight for each question was applied to the individual reviewer scores. Each individual reviewer had a total of 400 points possible. And the total sum of the application was determined by adding that and divided by the number of reviewers from that team. And then just to note, in the regional or the re-engagement opportunity grant, a multiplier as per the RFA was applied to the final score for priority areas and federally recognized tribes. I also do want to note that as part of the process, they were applicants identified who their or the eligible entity that they were applying, and federally recognized tribes was one of the categories. We did not, on this round, which is an area we want to improve, have any federally recognized tribes specifically applied for this grant. All right. So I believe that's a point I wanted to pause just quickly if there was any questions about kind of leading up to the scores. I know you all have the score, the recommended pieces as well. So Melissa, you can advance at 1. It will just go back to back to the grant requests. So we're, yeah, just do one more. There you go. So that's the initial slide. We started out with those numbers. So I did want to pause to see if the council had any questions about the process.
It looks like a really strong process. I can see new elements added that I haven't seen in past years, so I really appreciate that. I want to invite Sam. Did you have some comments that you wanted to share?
Yes, if I may. And then our group, and I had conversations with Paul, and then our group also had this conversation. And then when I mean group of the reviewers, when we read the applications, a point or concern that we wanted to bring up was it seemed that some applications were really polished. You know, they knew what to write, they knew how to write, but then there were some applications, their intent and their vision or what they wanted to do was there, but they may not have a professional grant writer, or they may be new to the game and so forth. And it seemed that, and I hate to say this, but to us, it seemed like some of the Portland Metro, especially the East Oregon, Eastern Portland people, their applications were really polished. And then some of them were repeat grantees, but versus some of the other grantees or first timers that, they may not have experience. So our group, and then we could tell like some of them, the newer ones, they didn't answer all the questions, that they should have and so forth. So I just want to bring that up. But then when we met, the process that, Abe and Paul did, where we looked at the scores, and if there were a great disparity between the scores, we had a discussion and so forth. And during our discussions, that point came up, was glaring. I hate to say it, so it's and it was like the rural areas, the smaller sites that, that's the thing that we wanted to, that's the only thing I want to bring up. And we struggled with that.
Thank you, Sam. I appreciate you bringing that up, and I want to say that over the years that I've been involved with the council, we have maintained that we really don't want to just send funds to organizations that have professional grant writers, and we want to make sure that we are equitable in our process. And so I appreciate naming that, and also hearing how the process was constructed, calling that out and trying to maintain and understand the intent behind the project and what the outcomes are that the project is going for, and not only sending funds to organizations that have professional grant writers. If Cord and Paul, if there's anything that you want to also mention to talk about that, I'd welcome it. And if not, I'd ask if the council has any particular questions.
Absolutely. So I was kind of smiling because one of the cool things about virtual is you can literally be a fly on the wall in the conversations. Because I wasn't scoring anything and I was help facilitated, I joined all of the team conversations around the reviews, and it was just rich conversation. And it was really, for me, being so new to this process, was really exciting to hear the conversation and just the thought that all of our volunteer reviewers put into this work was incredible, and the amount of time that they committed to doing it. Each reviewer did anywhere from 9 to 11 grant reviews in terms of it. And so we had, as part of the regional re-engagement grant, we had the same team because there was only 9 applications. And then we had 3 separate teams that did the opportunity grant reviews on it. And the discussion was really enjoyable in the sense that I think it helped really us norm some scores and really look at the in-depth applications even to another level. But I can open it up to questions, or we can move forward to the nitty-gritty of it, I guess, so to speak. All right. Oh, Brian.
2 quick points. I see a question from Karen that we should answer. And I think, it's in the chat. Celeste, oh no, sorry, she asked me. Karen just asked me a question. Karen, that's all right. New elements in the process, Cord and or Paul, can you highlight a thing or two that was different in this than what we've done in past like community investment process? Maybe I would just perhaps like the multiplier was kind of different, and maybe there's also the way in which we organized the review teams. But those are just a couple things that jump out to me. But do you want to highlight a specific thing or two?
Cord, I'll defer that to you since you've been part of that process.
Sure, yeah, I'm happy to talk a little bit about that. Yes, so I mean, in terms of the actual review process, there were a few big changes from what we've done previously. I think the biggest is having the staff involved as reviewers and also as facilitators of the group. And then the next was actually bringing all of the reviewers of a slate of applications together for that discussion. Historically, the reviewers would submit their scores and there would never be any reflection among the group. And we felt like that was an opportunity for better norming of scores, as Paul said, to have the group come back together. And I mean, I probably should say this, like every time I get a chance to talk during this part of the meeting, Paul just did a really just terrific job up and down in facilitating this. And for example, with the group coming together, every reviewer got to see their scores and the group scores. And wherever there were disparities in scores on any question, it was highlighted. So it helped the facilitators to guide discussion. As mentioned, we didn't lower scores in that process, but it allowed folks who might have felt strongly that an answer was good to say their piece about it. And in many cases, scores were raised by reviewers when they felt that the discussion had illuminated something about that question for them. So we felt like that change was really valuable. Now reflecting on it, I think it was the right choice. And I think another change worth noting is the multiplier for the priority regions. So within the opportunity grant, that was open to any entity, any eligible entity in the state. But we wanted to make sure that those areas where we identified the greatest need based on the data were prioritized. And so within the RFA, we noted that applications that served part of a priority region would get this basically a 10% boost to their score. I think virtually, I want to say about 90% probably of those applications from what I've seen in this data were in priority regions or partially served priority regions. So it still really drew a lot of folks from those areas we were trying to serve, but it helped us to ensure that, we had the ability to spread the awards around. I mean, Sam's comments I think are really important, and we wanted to try to find ways within the process to really still highlight some of those areas. I see Karen's put a note in the chat, which I think this might be something, Paul, you may have the ability to address as we kind of work through this. But I think those are the big changes that we wanted to highlight.
Real quickly, Paul, I do want to answer the question about the impact of the pandemic, but also be clear with folks that that having staff involved was, I think, a really smart and sound decision. And to reiterate something that Paul said earlier, if staff had a actual or perceived conflict of interest, for example, if they had maybe been involved with the grantee in some other context, right, had been a grant manager for them in the past for another or separate YDD grant, they did not score the application. So just to be clear, though, we had staff involved, staff who had some connection, if you will, to a re-engagement grantee, they weren't scoring. So know that. And then I think to Sam's point, we just appreciate, I think the multiplier was one specific way that we were trying to raise up applications from, as Cord just explained, priority regions. Then there are 8 of them, and those 8, 7 of the 8 are outside of the metro area, although 1 is within the metro area, admittedly. So, and I recognize, I think that there's, that is, you will hear how we've made some of the recommendations we've made, how we're thinking about how to award dollars, I think, widely and geographically, and then to create some, I'll just say, you know, funding opportunity in places where, you know, where some assistance, right, with the grant making might be needed, right, and some clarification, so that as you know, that as folks were writing answers and so on, like where we can still maybe provide a little bit of support and maybe a little bit of funding to help move those along for the next biennium. Paul, do you want to talk about pandemic?
Absolutely. So I do think it's important to say I haven't closely reviewed all the grant applications as just part of the facilitator portion, but I would say in general, hearing the conversations, I think there is a lot more talk around how youth access technology, how do they engage with it. I think a lot of the applicants were really thoughtful in how do you make contact with a disconnected youth without physically making contact with a disconnected youth? How do you go through that process, right? And so I think people were thinking about that, looking at the youth that are already enrolled in their programs. That was a pretty big focus area as well. In terms of the number received, it's hard to compare, being this the inaugural grants for this, but I would say that I am pleased with the number of applications that we received. We were concerned of doing that, and seeing that we had almost 6 million in requests is pretty exciting to see it, and I feel really confident, like Brian was saying, on some strategies that we've employed to on our recommendations to try to really help move this work forward. So Karen, I hope I kind of answered your question on that.
Yes, thank you. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. All right. So I believe the first request is based for the regional re-engagement grant. And Celeste, you'll have to kind of, I'm not sure if we want to run through both of them or how we're going to do the voting. So I'll kind of defer to you on a question with that.
Yeah, so I think we determined we would look at one and then the other rather than both. So let's focus first on the regional one, look at it its entirety, take the vote, and then we'll do the same with the opportunity grant.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. So Melissa, if you want to just advance that one for me there. All right. So I know this is kind of hard to read. You can make it a little bit bigger on your screen. I'm gonna honestly have to make it bigger on my screen. And Melissa's going to try to enlarge it a little bit for you. So just kind of a layout of the recommended awards in this spreadsheet. So at the top of the screen, you'll notice that there's just some general information around the overall grant applications, but then also the total proposed for each of those areas, as well as the technical assistance awards that we're going to propose for it. So you can see here, when you look at the regional re-engagement grant, the recommended awards are in green, with the total of the recommended awards in dark green right below it. So we have 4 organizations recommended for a proposed grant amount of 290,000 each. And the reason we have proposed that adjusted amount is to scroll down, Melissa, or I think maybe it's my screen. You can see the technical assistance piece, or the technical assistance grants down there on the bottom for a total of 120,000. And the reason that we're recommending it is, I'm going to go back to when we looked at the scores, we saw a very a big divide. In fact, I think it was like a 19-point divide. Look at my notes here. Excuse me. Yeah, a 19-point separation between those sets of scores, where the top scores were within 13 points of each other for those top 4. And so what we saw in those grant applications is that there's a lot of great work happening and a lot of great ideas. And so through discussion, we came to the idea of seeing if with the possible idea of doing some technical assistance grants to those areas to help boost their work in those regions, because our focus is really on getting organizations working in each of the 8 regions. And so you'll notice that many of these are from separate regions that aren't awarded. And so that idea was there. And to be honest, we have not worked out the details to those technical assistance grants at this point. That would be something that we would move forward should the council agree with that idea. And I believe at this point, I'll kind of open it up for questions if people have. Celeste, and I'll also look to you for guidance on next steps.
Sure. Just to restate, so you're saying that we are recommending $290,000 to the 4 grantees listed on the screen, and a set aside of $120,000 for technical assistance grant to be determined at a later date?
Correct.
Okay, wonderful. Any questions from the council or comments?
I have a question. Are the proposed technical assistant grants limited to those 4 awarded grantees, or is that a wholly separate process?
So thank you. It's a great clarifying. So the technical assistance grants would be a direct award grant, and the idea would be to those that are recommended for unawarded applications.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you for clarifying. I'm smiling because I realized that was not clear. So thank you.
No, that's okay. Thank you.
And so just to clarify, Paul, the suggestion is to split that 120 between those 5 other organizations so that they can build their work in this area. Is that right?
Yes, the idea would be to use those funds to help support each of those organizations. What the actual funding would be would have to be determined at a later point through discussion with them of what they would need for that support.
Sure. Okay.
I should note that it's noted on here, Airway Science for Kids is listed in the recommended unawarded applications, but that note ROG grant proposal is to indicate that they did have a proposal in the Reengagement Opportunity Grant. And that proposal was, I suppose I'm previewing the next slate, but it was awarded. So they were successful with a different proposal, just not with this regional re-engagement proposal.
Thanks, Corey. We also have a question in the chat from Jeff Parker. Paul, can you remind us if there was a question about scalability in the application?
Can Paul remind us if there was a question about scalability? Jeff, would you mind giving me a little bit more clarification on that if possible? I just want to make sure I'm answering the question right.
I'm just curious on that, 4 equal size chunks of 290. I just want to know if the applicants themselves were asked a question in the application around their ability to scale upwards or downwards in this. And I'm just concerned that maybe 290 doesn't work well, whereas a different lower number might work better. And so I just don't know. I don't know if we asked that in the application itself.
So a specific question on that was not addressed in the RFA. As part of the RFA, we did clarify that YDD can adjust. And so that language is all in there depending on how we see the need for it. Through discussion, we felt that was a kind of a reasonable number to adjust with being 6-month grants. These are pretty substantial awards for 6 months. And so that's why we came to the 30 as kind of even number. Cord and Brian, you guys may have a piece to add to that.
That's what I was gonna add, was that one thing to keep in mind is that this is a 6-month grant. So when compared with prior YDD awards, it's still quite a substantial amount of funding for a lot of work in a short period.
Jeff, I'd also add that the budget detail wasn't, didn't get, I mean, it was large categories in terms of the budget aspects of it. So that, from the question itself, that would be hard to determine. So Jeff, I just want to clarify, I answered, you said thank you. So I'm assuming that I answered your question.
Yeah, and I don't have anything to add. I just think that we're learning. We got 6 months. We're gonna release another RFA in the winter or spring for re-engagement in the next biennium. So there's a opportunity to refine questions and process too as we go forward.
And any unspent funds are returned to the council, and is that right? Or they're returned to the state? Yeah, okay, thanks.
Yeah, return to the state. And yeah, that's an interesting, I don't want to go down the rabbit hole, but we'll be tracking these closely and looking at how folks are spending. And got 6 months to spend it. And we do have, some situations where grantees in other areas have been challenged. So we'll watch that closely.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for noting that. Okay, so just want to check and ask. We have some presentations that we have on the screen, and you have it in your handouts. The next step is to ask if there is a motion. And I'm curious about if the council has a motion.
I'd be glad to make a motion of approval for the regional re-engagement grant allocations as presented.
And Zan, does your motion include the technical assistance?
And I will explicitly address the technical assistance. Yes, I think it's a great idea and endorse that. Okay, great. So we have a motion on the floor for recommending the awards as presented for the 4 workforce or the 4 regional re-engagement grants, as well as the technical assistance grant.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor in a second. Are there any comments regarding the motion?
It's John Teague. I'm just going to add, I really appreciate seeing the emphasis on workforce development.
Thank you. Others? Comments, questions? Okay, let's go ahead and do a vote. Melissa will do a roll call vote, and as a reminder, if you have not a perceived but an actual conflict of interest, then go ahead. You won't be voting on this, and you can just state that if she calls your name. Melissa, go ahead.
Thank you, Celeste. Pamela Abernethy. Janet Ahrens is not attending this meeting. Jaime Arredondo.
I think Jaime should be on.
Yeah, I saw him. Can
He's
you
on.
Can you unmute Jaime?
He's unmuted, but we can't hear you. You can put it in the chat too, Melissa or Celeste, if it's easier to.
Thank you. Zan Ojiro.
Aye.
Aishatu Berry.
Yes, I'm here.
And you're
Aishatu, how do you vote?
Hello?
We hear you, Aishatu. We just want to know how you vote. Aishatu, now you're muted.
I will chat with some folks who might be having some technical issues as we go through this vote. Eric Cardella.
Aye.
Thank you. Parasa Chenrami.
Aye.
Oh, wait, we had earlier that you recused yourself. Does that stand?
I think I didn't see any districts in this list. Am I missing some districts? With the regional re-engagement grant?
There are no districts that applied.
There are no districts. Okay, so I should be able to vote on this group.
Oh,
Aye.
Excuse me, there is one educational service district. I missed.
Yeah, Multnomah ESD is on the list.
Oh, got it. I see it now. So I should probably abstain just to make sure that I'm following protocol.
Got it. Thank you, Parasa. Janine, same for you. We had that you had recused yourself earlier?
Correct, I abstain.
Thank you. Alicia Hayes?
I vote yes.
Thank you. Celeste Jansen?
I will abstain.
And Andy Leonard? Tabidi Lewis? Tabidi was going to join us later maybe, so I'll check on that. Adrian Livingston?
Yes.
Thank you. Christina McMahon?
I approved, yes.
Thank you. Maricela Ortega Guzman?
I vote yes.
Thank you. Destiny Ortiz?
I vote yes.
Jeff Parker, we had earlier that you recused. Does that stand?
No, Jeff Parker votes in the affirmative on this one. I will need to abstain in the next vote on the other.
Excellent. Thank you. Molly Rogers?
I vote yes.
Diana Rojas?
Yes.
Karen Spencer?
I vote yes.
John Teague?
Yes.
Liz Thorne?
I vote yes.
And Koi Vu. Are you able to vote on this one?
Hi, this is Koi. Yes, I have no conflict with the re-engagement grants, and I vote yes.
Excellent. Thank you, Council.
And Melissa, I'd like the record to show that we have both Jaime and Isatu who voted yes in the chat. So I don't know how public record works with the recording in the chat, but I wanted to make sure we knew that.
Thank you.
So I think that given the fact that we had a quorum and we had a number of council members who voted yes, those awards, that motion holds, and we have voted to make those recommended awards. So now let's go ahead and look at the opportunity grants.
All right, so thank you. It's always interesting doing the votes via virtual, so exciting. So thank you, Melissa and Celeste, for running through that. So Melissa, if you want to move forward to the next slide. This one is going to be a little bit harder to read. Again, I'm going to try to make it bigger on my screen. It might be a little bit easier to see if you have a second screen that you can pull it up. But you'll notice here it's a similar format. All of the same grant information is at the top. Organization names are listed on the left-hand side. And then with the regional grants, we only had a single priority area listed by all of the applicants. In here, this is the difference that I was talking about in terms of determining where their main priority area is. So that you have the priority region here listed, and then others selected other additional ones in terms of their service area. And so that's where the variance comes into play a little bit. So here you have in alphabetical order all of what we're recommending as full awards for a total of 2.389, or just under 2.4 million for grant awards there. With the recommended with the regional side, we do have some money left over. And so, Melissa, if you want to slide down to the next slide, we had to split this, so apologize in advance for that. You'll see that we had a recommended award with adjusted allocations. And this is actually where that big divide in scores came out. And I believe this was the biggest divide in all of the scores for the opportunity grants, and actually had a 15-point separation between the scores of the fully funded and the adjusted allocations. The exciting part about this is with the funds that were left over, we actually went to fully funding all but 2 of the grantee applications. And so what we're recommending is that with the funds that we had left, which was just over 330,000, we can fund all of the applicants in the yellow at 66.85%. And what that means is that all applicants that did not receive a regional grant would receive some funds as an opportunity grant, either fully funded or at 66% of their request. You'll notice in the blue, organizations recommended for a regional re-engagement grant are listed here. And as part of our Q&A and RFA process, we said applicants could receive one or the other. Since that was the higher of the two grants, that's why in the recommendations it was that they would receive the regional grant applications on that. So that actually makes it, with the technical grant assistance and the two other grant types, that makes it to the 4 million being funded. So with that, I'll open it up for any questions.
All right, thank you very much. I'd like to invite any members of the council to make any questions, make any comments or pose any questions. I just want to say it's exciting to me that we were able to allocate the funds in this manner and fund such a large number of the grant applications. This is really different than some of the previous years and some of the number, the percentage of applicants that we've been able to fund. So really exciting to get this money out the door. So thank you for your work. Any other questions or comments by any council members?
Well, I'll also mention, sorry.
Yeah.
That part of our decision to look at all of that is through addressing all of those adjusted allocations, we were able to reach all regions, priority regions that we had identified. So that was another exciting piece that I thought was important to point out as part of the adjusted allocations.
Wonderful. And similar to the previous awards, these are also 6-month awards as well, right? This is through the end of the fiscal year for the state.
Correct. A very short time.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, I know there's a lot of work that needs to happen quickly for these grantees and for the staff in order to manage the funds. If there are not any questions, then we can entertain a vote. I'm wondering if there is a motion by any council members.
Hey, Celeste, just a comment. Would it maybe be helpful, and I know that folks are hopefully looking at this PDF, and maybe Melissa, you'll scroll back to the top, to the next other page, in case folks are interested in seeing that list.
Great.
So you have, and just let us know if you want to see at any point both lists. Thanks, Melissa.
Celeste,
Yeah.
this is Molly Rogers.
Yeah.
And you asked for a motion?
Yes.
I move to approve the grant awards as presented.
Thank you, Molly. So we have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
Oh, second, Ojiro.
Wonderful. Okay. So we have a motion and a second. Any conversation about the motion on the floor? Questions, modifying statements? Okay, it sounds like we are ready for this vote. Melissa, can you go ahead and begin with the roll call vote?
Yes, thank you. Pamela Abernethy. We know Janet Ahrens is absent. Jaime Arredondo. We can look for you. We can look for your response in chat again. Thanks, Jaime. Zan Ojiro.
Yes.
Aishatu Berry.
Yes.
Thank you. Eric Cardella.
Aye.
Parasa. You abstaining from this one?
Hi, this is Parsa. Yep, I'll need to abstain. Thank you.
Thank you. And Janine abstaining from this one?
Correct, abstain.
Alicia Hayes.
Yes.
Celeste Jansen.
I'm going to abstain as well.
Andy Leonard. Tabiti Lewis. Adrian Livingston.
Yes.
Christina McMahon.
Yes.
Maricela Ortega Guzman.
Yes.
Destiny Ortiz,
Vote yes.
thank you. Jeff Parker,
Yeah, Melissa, I will have to abstain unless I'm needed for purposes of a quorum. Then I would emphatically vote yes and just abstain from the Northwest Youth Corps proposal.
all right, thank you, Jeff. Molly Rogers,
I vote in support.
Diana Rojas,
Yes.
Karen Spencer,
I vote yes.
John Teague,
Yes.
Liz Thorne,
Yes.
and Koi Vu.
This is Koi, abstain.
Thank you, Council, for your votes.
And Melissa, I just want to make sure the record shows that Jaime voted yes, and that's in the chat.
Thank you, Celeste.
Okay, wonderful. Well, this motion has passed, and so we have also allocated the following re-engagement awards that you see up on the screen. So I would like to say congratulations to the organizations and districts that have put forward successful grants. We look forward to hearing more about the work that's going to happen over the next 6 months, and we look forward to working in partnership with you as we really focus on re-engagement. So congratulations, this was an exciting moment for the council. And yes, Jeff noted, well done, all these investments will go to great use. Let's see, are any comments or questions on next steps from the staff?
So I can jump in. First of all, thank you to the council. It's, like I said at the beginning, it's been quite a process getting here. Super exciting to see it moving forward. So next steps, we'll start working on the grant agreements, and that'll begin either this afternoon or tomorrow that we'll be getting these out. Our hope is to have those rolling beginning part of January. And it'll be a pretty quick turnaround, we hope. And I think we have everything on deck for that. So Jeff did have a question, what happens to money that might go unspent by these applicants? That is a piece where June 30th, 2021 is the end date for these grants. And so that does return back to the state general fund. I believe it's the general fund. Cord would have to clarify that, but it goes back to the state.
Looks like Zan also has a question. Zan, do you want to go ahead?
Thank you. I have to admit I'm a little bit of a geography nerd here, and I'm just looking at the regions and then the grantees, and there's a little bit of a kind of a donut hole that's formed in my particular geography, and that is that if I go back to the regional list, Lynn County is included in the South Valley region. And yet, in terms of workforce investment boards, it's connected to the Willamette one, that's Polk, Marion, Yamhill. And in terms of the Community Action Agency, it's affiliated with Lynn Benton Lincoln. And somehow they didn't get included in any of the proposals. So I feel like I need to at least make the comment that somehow the regional breakout, it's imperfect. And maybe we need to go back to some of the grantees and ask about coverage for that area. Because of my geography, Lynn County is one of those areas that really does need this kind of investment.
I think it's a really good point, and that's we've been in conversation as we've seen these kind of roll out of how do we best provide that, and so that's some work that we'll definitely take your comments and hopefully move forward with that next re-engagement RFAs, but also through the negotiations with the awardees, we'll be working on really defining those areas more specifically than just a checkbox in the application. So hopefully I'll have more detail a little bit as we move forward. And I know we didn't recognize that per se in that work. So
yeah, Lane County has gotten quite a bit, but that Lynn is clumped with them, and I don't see any emphasis at all on Lynn County. So thank you for acknowledging that.
Yeah, can I add just a quick addition to that and a additional response for Jeff Parker? I think that there are a number of communities and areas where we just didn't see applications. So I think part of our work is to try to build awareness and to do the outreach necessary to make folks aware of the opportunity. And I think part of the negotiation process and talking with both regional and opportunity grantees is to better understand their service area. And if we identify opportunities where sometimes projects will say, well, we're actually thinking about going out here, and they can do that. I mean, there's the possibility of projects broadening, but long term, we want to see applications. I mean, Lynn County was identified as a county we wanted to prioritize, so we're going to work on that. And just to add a note to the response to Jeff's question, I mean, throughout the next 6 months, we monitor the budgets pretty closely. The grant managers pay a lot of attention to spending, and when we do ask grantees if they identify that they're not going to be able to fully utilize the funds they've been awarded to let us know, that there's not a penalty for that. We appreciate the communication, and we can reallocate funds. And in the past, we have periodically had to do that sort of thing as we get close to the end of a biennium. So we have the flexibility to reduce or increase awards during the grant period if it becomes necessary and appropriate to do so. So we do a lot of work to try to make sure we don't leave money on the table, and really proactively communicate and work with grantees to help them with their spending process. And I did ask for clarification. This funding is coming out of the corporate activity tax. So it is different from general fund. My assumption is it will be treated like state general fund, where it just reverts back to the state's coffers if we don't obligate it for a grantee. But I have asked to verify that is the case.
Thank you, Cord. I'd like to address Adrian's question, and then I'd like to pause and give everyone a 5-minute break before we continue on. Adrian had a question just about the number of people, it looks like 20, who viewed the application but didn't complete it. I know, working from a nonprofit in the nonprofit sector, that frequently happens, where sometimes it's one person or another in the organization who views and there's a handoff, or some folks who look at the requirements and think about, do we have the capacity? Do we have the capacity to spend the money in this time? Do our organizational goals align with the goals of the grant fund? And then sometimes, especially on the regional grants, those are meant to be done in partnership, and so they're kind of bigger grants. There also can be, for instance, partners that are viewing the grants in addition to the person who actually submits. So that seems pretty standard to me, but I also wanted to invite Cord or Paul or any other council or staff to address Adrian's comment.
Thank you, Celeste. So actually, yes, I agree very much with those comments as well. I think we saw some applicants that signed in and then decided it wasn't really the grant application for them. But it is on my list as part of our continued engagement and community engagement, is to reach out to those organizations just to find out more. Especially, I haven't looked closely at where they're kind of based out of, but I want to make sure that we are reaching out to anybody that did look at the applications to learn more during the open community engagement process that we'll have between these RFAs. So that is part of my to-do list, so to speak.
Thank you.
Great, that's wonderful. That gives us a good opportunity to look at barriers and just, question and be reflective about our process. So that's great. Okay, it's 11:02 right now. Let me double check that that's right. Yeah, 11:03. So let's take a 5-minute break. At 11:08, we will continue the conversation. We have potentially one additional break going on. We hope to actually go until around 1 o'clock today. So let's pause 5 minutes. We'll see you back here. Thank you. All right, council members, it's 11:10, so we're a couple minutes past 5 minutes. I'm not sure. I see a lot of folks still have their cameras off, so I'm not sure if you are back. If you are, if you could do me a favor and just, great, show your video so that we know you're here and we are talking to a group. Hi there. It looks like we need a couple more folks to return. Okay, I saw some thumbs up. That's great. Okay, well, welcome back. Today, this is clearly a packed agenda, and we have quite a bit to discuss, and it always takes a little bit longer than we anticipated when we are sending money out the door. We even built in extra time and we still went over. So appreciate that we could shorten the break. The next item on the agenda, we're going to have a first reading of a Senate bill. This is not a voting item, but before we do that, I just wanted, Brian noted that he had one comment to make. Brian?
Yeah, I just, well, first, just appreciation to staff and council for getting us through the last award approval process. Regarding individual scores, and maybe this was said or dropped into the chat, and we can drop this stuff in. Cord or Melissa, I think there's we have a link and a little piece on this, but I'll just say it quickly. The individual application scores and overall scores for RFAs are available upon request. So we ask that applicants or other members of the public use the ODE Public Records Request portal so that they can track, so we can track the requests and ensure that they are addressed in a timely fashion. So we'll drop, there you go, Cord just dropped it into the chat, the thing that I just read, and then ideally this link to the ODE Public Records Request portal. I think we also have a responsibility to get out some information around our notice of intent to award. So we'll be getting that out as well. But just again, for folks who are interested in the more detailed or like as individual scoring, which of course we have, that's the way to get it. Cord, or anything else on that?
All right, thank you, Brian. And yes, I see in the chat we have that public records request page. Okay, so just as a little bit of framing for this next item on the agenda, we have, when a law is created or when there is the initial law is created and there needs to be specific language, we have an opportunity to read that language as a council and collect public comment, and then there will be a second reading. So this is what we're going to hear. And Cord, if you can just make sure that folks are aware of the process, so that this might be the first time that some folks have had an opportunity to hear a first reading and just kind of know the process. And I also had a question for you about public comment and if that needs to happen now, or if that is just the public comment period is open. So if you can make sure that I know that, that would be great.
Sure, I'll address all of that. Hi everyone. Just for the record, my name is Cord Bucher, and now that we see each other on the screens and it's not the phone, I've kind of forgotten that I should announce myself when I'm speaking. But I am going to be presenting to you. This is the first reading of administrative rules for the Compliance Monitoring Authority under the Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Act. So this was, these are the rules that were actually written in response to Senate Bill 15, which was passed back in 2019. And that Senate bill gave the Youth Development Council, the Compliance Monitoring Authority, to do the work that we have been doing collaboratively with law enforcement and secure facilities across the state for a number of years. We now have the authority for compliance monitoring in our statutes. And essentially the law said that we would make rules to elucidate how we carry out that work, and do so with input from numerous stakeholders who were impacted by these rules. Melissa, if it's, I will share the rules. I guess I can share, I believe. That way, if I need to scroll around, I can easily get to the part I want to get to. A couple of quick notes. A first reading doesn't mean that I'm going to read all these rules aloud. We have shared, so these rules are now published. A draft was published back on December 1. We shared a recent revision with the council the end of last week. We actually got some comments right after we had submitted the draft to the Secretary of State for publication. Chief Teague from the council actually gave us some really valuable input, and so we wanted to make a couple of changes. And so I will note where we've already made some changes, but the important thing to note is that the first reading is essentially an opportunity for the council to comment on these rules, ask questions or clarification as needed. And we will have a public comment period at the end of this meeting, but the public comment period for administrative rules is, I believe, at a minimum around 50 days. And we're going to be accepting public comment into the month of March. In the posting, we actually have the comment period noted as going until March 18th, which is the next council quarterly meeting. But we'll actually revise that to close public comment at the beginning of March so that we can get final rules and our responses to any comments we receive out to the council ahead of a final adoption vote. So this is just the first of two council actions regarding administrative rules. For those of you who were around for the re-engagement rule adoption, this is pretty similar in nature to that. And so I am gonna just share my screen and quickly talk about what is in these administrative rules and note a couple of places where we have made a couple of updates already. Can everyone see the rules here on my screen? Or on your screen, rather. Looks like a yes.
Maybe make it a little bit bigger, Cord. I don't know if that's possible.
I think it is.
I can't. People may have the ability to make it bigger on their own screens too, but thanks.
So the rules are structured. Let me go to do this. Sorry, I want to get to that. There we go. Oh, I hate that mode. Okay, there we go. So what I wanted to do is just show you that each section of the rules covers, broadly, the first section is definitions. Second section actually talks about the procedures for maintaining compliance with custody and facility provisions of the Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Act. We've talked about a lot of this in the past, but I'll quickly note the JJDPA is the federal law that provides guidelines for keeping young people safe whenever they're in secure custody. So custody guidelines cover things like separating adults and juveniles in any kind of secure facility, deinstitutionalizing status offenders, and removing juveniles from jails. This JJDPA also covers the reduction of racial and ethnic disparities. And so the work of both the compliance monitor and the RED coordinator are covered within these rules. I'll also note these rules are pretty broad in terms of just essentially defining terms and broadly describing processes. But Ryan Shands, the compliance monitor, who unfortunately couldn't join us today, is actually in the process of developing guidance, as we've always done, that goes into the detailed processes for the reporting and monitoring that happens. We'll be producing that guidance along with an executive summary of the rules as we go through this public comment period, and using that to really supplement this to make sure that everything is really clear and hopefully fairly user-friendly for all of the entities that are subject to monitoring. The rules do briefly talk about how we collect data for the racial and ethnic disparities provisions of the JJDPA. And we provide guidance on how we'll do technical assistance for both the institutions that have secure custody, as well as anytime that we identify and want to address racial and ethnic disparities at any decision point in the juvenile justice system. So I will just quickly note that one of the things that we've tried to do to sort of improve this is just make sure that all of our defined terms are capitalized throughout the document so that it's clear that we're referring back to terms that are covered in the definitions. Sorry, I'm scrolling here. I know that can make folks seasick. I did clarify for the purpose of just agency flexibility that rather than referring to the Racial and Ethnic Disparities Coordinator and the Compliance Monitor as positions, refer to them as roles. That way, if their titles were ever to be edited in any way, or if the responsibility had to be covered by another staff person, we don't run into any trouble there. So we're defining it as a role and work that will happen, but we have some flexibility in terms of how that work might be assigned at any given time. One thing that, oops, I wanted to go up here. I know that some of this has already been shared with the Juvenile Justice Committee. And one of the pieces of input that we got from Chief Teague was just to really clarify the data that we're collecting, and that these are required data elements that we collect from institutions. An institution is defined as a facility that has secure custody in it. And so this is, again, this is really just clarifying data collection that already happens, but we go through and identify each of the data elements and show the options in terms of how that element is reported, and just try to make that all a bit clearer for folks. And the last thing I would add is that we plan to provide, intend to do a lot of guidance up front, and then part of the role of both the Compliance Monitor and RED Coordinator is to work with the folks that are affected by this and always provide technical assistance as needed to help everyone comply. So that's a really quick overview. I'm not going to keep sharing this. I know folks have it, and if you have questions about any particular items in this or comments on these rules in general, I'd like to open it up to the council for that. And I'll just note that we do intend to bring the final draft of the rules to the Juvenile Justice Committee prior to the full council meeting in March, so that there'll be another opportunity for that committee to weigh in. And throughout the public comment period, members of the public and council members are welcome to provide us with input. So this isn't the only opportunity, but this will be the official opportunity to do the first reading. And then if there are no comments, then Celeste, I would pass it back to you for a motion to vote on accepting this. I believe it's, since it's first reading, just confirming that the council accepts the draft rules for a first reading. And I don't believe there's actually a lot to the motion, but just that it's officially documented that it happened.
Oh, Court, I thought that as a first reading, we didn't have to do a motion, but you're saying we probably should.
Let me double check. I asked about this.
Okay.
I asked the rules coordinator. Let me say what he said, because I thought he said we did, but I'll verify that. And I see Chief Teague's on camera, so I want to get his input.
As far as whether we need a motion or not, I have no idea. But if we do, I move.
Yeah,
And so this is Molly. If we need a second, I will be glad to second it out of the Juvenile Justice Committee.
All right.
Oh, you know, I misread it. So as part of the first read, there is no specific action that needs to be taken besides discussion and comment with the council. And so I apologize for my confusion. We only have to have a motion to adopt the final rules, which we'll do at the next meeting.
Yes.
Okay,
Thank
so
you,
I
Court. That was our understanding, or my understanding. I thought yeah. So Chief Teague, you were saying something, sorry.
I'll withdraw my motion then.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you for that overview, Cord. And again, we have an opportunity if there's anything at a later date prior to the March 1st deadline. If you have any comments, feel free to submit it to our team. I think that if we do not need a motion, that we can move on to the next item on the agenda. So I'd like to invite Anya to share. We're going to now talk about OJJDP Title II and the 3-year plan.
Thank you, Celeste. I am waiting for Melissa to help me put something on the screen for everyone to see. She's our operator today. Melissa, sorry, it's the other one. Oh, actually, no, you're right. There are 2 planning presentations that we will be sharing today. So the first one is directly connected to Court's presentation earlier today. So in order for us to be engaged in receiving funds from the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, we have to have several elements in place. And Melissa, one of them is the 3-year plan, which is technically an application for federal funding that happens every 3 years. That goes on a cycle. Well, the application is renewed every year, but overall we plan for 3 years. And interestingly enough, this year is the planning year for the next 3-year cycle. So very briefly, so the Formula Grants Program is authorized under the Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Act of 1974, and as it was amended. The latest amendment happened in 2018, and the act received a new name, Juvenile Justice Reform Act. But we still go back to the origin, and it is, for our purposes, is still JDDP, the Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Act. The funding is distributed by the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. In fact, the act establishes the office. So without the act, there is no federal office. Without federal office, there is no money. So one of the funding areas that the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention allocates is the Formula Grants Program. And that formula grant means that there's a formula that is calculated. It's by Congress every year that determines how much money each state and each territory is eligible to receive. It's population-based. I do not know exactly how the formula operates, but we receive the actual funding amount once we get the grant award. So everything that we do in preparation for receiving the grant award, we're kind of using current funding level as a proxy. But regardless, so the money goes to states directly. Each governor or whatever office serves as the governor in the territory, I'm not really sure, decides on which agency within the state or the territory will be administrating the funding. In Oregon, it's us. It's the Youth Development Division of the Oregon Department of Education that is the state administrating agency. And the money can go to serve different purposes within the state. And the majority of the funding needs to be passed through to local jurisdictions or community organizations or faith-based organizations. But the key word is local. The state does not get to keep the majority of the funding. And the programs can vary within the purpose areas that's been established under the Act. Could be for treatment, could be job training, could be community-based programs and services, system improvement, restorative practices, re-entry aftercare services, and school programs to prevent truancy, among others. Melissa, if you don't mind moving the slide, please. Now, the eligibility is important. We have to meet 33 statutory requirements in order to receive the funding. What Court was sharing with you earlier today, that's one of the 33 requirements. We have to have a monitoring authority within the state. So I'm so happy to say that for the passing of Senate Bill 15 was no small achievement. For the first time, we have an actual authority to do compliance monitoring within the state. Prior to that, it was perceived just like a conflict of interest thing. It was just a good partnership based. Now, the next requirement out of the 33, we have to prepare a 3-year juvenile justice and delinquency prevention plan, and that's the purpose of this presentation today. We must establish a state advisory group, also known as SAG, and this is you, the YDC, the Youth Development Council. And I just want to emphasize here that although we have a juvenile justice committee, of the Youth Development Council. The Youth Juvenile Justice Committee serves as in a way an advisory group to the advisory group, but the actual state advisory group in Oregon equates to Youth Development Council, YDC. So it's utmost important that the council members participate in the planning process and the administration of the plan.
Hey, Anya, I just want to reiterate that point, and it's an interesting piece for us, perhaps maybe a little technical, but we are essentially, in this, as we deal with our juvenile justice related items, we're meeting as the state advisory group. And I've just been toying around in my head with different ways to acknowledge this combined expectation that we have, right? Both as a council and making decisions around grant awards and so on, but also then in having this authority around compliance monitoring and some of the juvenile justice pieces. So it's important, for example, in our agenda that we have this specific time dedicated to these more state advisory group pieces. And then of course we have a subcommittee report later on, which I believe Molly will present on, but just acknowledging that the sort of dual functions that, or multiple functions that the YDC plays.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Brian, for making that clarification and kind of helping me emphasize this message. And lastly, and Cord made reference to that in his presentation. So the 4 requirements listed later are called core 4 requirements. And they're also called 4 core protections, which is an old-fashioned, but from my perspective, preferred language, because that the original intention of the act was to protect children. And I think we should always keep it in mind that the purpose of all of this is to protect children who somehow got involved or are at risk of getting involved with the juvenile justice and criminal justice system. And I'm not gonna, you can read them for the purpose of time saving. Melissa, would you please take us to the next stage? But yeah, and each one of the core requirements actually equates money. If we don't meet one of them, we'll lose 20% of funding. If we don't meet 2, we'll lose 40% and so forth. Now, I initially thought that I was gonna steal this chart, but then I thought about it and I'm actually not stealing it because it was developed by the American Institute for Research, who was funded by the OJJDP to provide technical assistance from states. So I'm just sharing the beautiful work that they've created. And I decided, well, why should I make up my own if we can't just use theirs? I think it's a beautiful display of the visual of what the planning process involves. So the first stage is research and engagement. And all of these pretty pictures are actually required under the required planning process. So these are required elements of the plan. So we need to get input from youth and communities. We need to get input from professionals, and there'll be more to that in our actual timeline. So the idea is that we are not creating the plan in a vacuum here, but we do have a meaningful communication with both partners, and by partners, stakeholders, and other state agencies, community-based organizations, and also, most importantly, youth. And I know, Brian, you may want to say it yourself, but I think one of the takeaways from the training that several of us attended a couple of weeks ago, when a youth member said to not, Brian, would you say it, because you got the exact wording so well.
Oh goodness. And I'd have to ask Sanji to say it.
Oh, goodness.
Knows
Nothing for
about it without it.
Right. And I think this is really key. And I should have just put it on a sticky note on my laptop. I tend to forget important things just because they're so important when I'm on the spot. Anyway, so and another part of the engagement we've covered, but there's also the research aspect to it, and that's a juvenile crime analysis that is currently underway. And once we get all this information, then we need to decide how to put it to good use. And then we'll review the information, both what we will gather from stakeholders and youth and what the juvenile crime analysis will tell us. And it's currently being, actually the data are being analyzed and some summaries will be ready for our review in January. And the research group that's working on it is MPC Research, who's been a great partner for us over the years, and they also do evaluation of our juvenile crime prevention initiative, which we will talk about in a few minutes. And we'll also need to review our current priorities to see if they're still relevant or not, and then with that move on forward. And then the final stage is the actual writing of the plan. And with that, it will be identification of priority areas, and each priority area means what is going to be identified as a funding priority. So what is it that we will be applying for? Not very different from, actually, it is different because priorities, we got a menu of priorities, but we got to choose from them based on our needs. So that's kind of nice. But the outcomes, that expected outcomes and performance indicators are set for us. So there is a kind of technical aspect to it as well. Elsie, if you don't mind moving us to the next slide, please. And you can see we're getting close.
Did I miss the testimonials?
I don't think it's a question for me, but I don't think you have.
Les, do you want to?
Yeah, no, just as a reminder, so we will have a public comment section at the end of the meeting, and know that you haven't missed that. We're now still covering the staff reports. A significant portion of the next, hour or so is to staff reports, and then we'll do committee reports, and after that we'll do public comment. So sorry about that. And Anya, do you want to go ahead and continue?
Absolutely. So these are our currently funded priorities. It's compliance monitoring, racial and ethnic disparities, school programs, juvenile justice, system improvement, and gangs. And just so you know, for the sake of timekeeping, all of these areas are being discussed in detail by the Juvenile Justice Committee. So if there is any interest from other YDC council members, because as you now remember, you are all state advisory group members, and your input is much appreciated and politely solicited. You're always welcome to join us at our planning meetings. And Melissa, if you could please take me to the last slide of this particular presentation. This is our timeline. We anticipate the juvenile crime analysis to be completed by the end of December 30, well, by the end of this year. And with the caveat, so the required elements of the crime analysis will be completed by that time and shared with us, but we also had the communication with the research group about additional questions that might be of interest to YDD and YDC, but that's we're gonna be developed at in stages, so that we'll have the required elements first and then we'll continue. So although it says December 31st, it will be just like the first section of the report, and there will be continuation of that with additional information. The community partners survey, my hope is to finish it this year, but it will be probably trickling in as we develop the plan. The youth survey, this is where I will need to solicit help from the youth committee and see if we can come up with a way to communicate with youth across the state, maybe tribal youth councils and other youth groups to get their input. So Maricela and other members of the youth committee will have this conversation at the next meeting, if not sooner. The Juvenile Justice Committee meetings have been scheduled, and each of the meetings will, at least a part of the meeting will be the development of the plan. As you know, remember that pretty diagram that I showed you. So if other YDC members are interested in participating in the process, so it's first Monday of each month. We usually meet from 1 to 3 p.m. So just please let me know if there is an interest from you. Now the draft plan is due by March 1st because that's where we would like to have at least a draft available both for the Juvenile Justice Committee and should give enough time for the council for the approval. Now, I think I messed up the council meeting date. I have it the week earlier here compared to what I just earlier heard during our meeting, but so March 18th will give us an extra week, which is even better. And I have here the anticipated plan submission date, March 31st, 2021. The reason it says anticipated is that's because that's our best estimate. The solicitation has not been released by the OJJDP as of today, but traditionally March 31st was the due date during previous 3-year planning processes. I'm not going to speculate what's the likelihood of it to be the same, but that's the only date I can even guess. So that's our current plan. It's unlikely that the due date will be any sooner because it just does not leave us enough time for planning. So with that completes my section of this presentation. I don't know if Molly, other Juvenile Justice Committee members, council members, if you have any comments, additional information to be shared, volunteers.
No, Anya, this is Molly Celeste. I really appreciate the participation from any council member, and it has been a fun group. They're very interactive, and we did move our meetings to monthly because we have a large agenda of tasks to get through. So it's the first Monday of every month from 1 to 3, and we'll just invite any of the members to join and participate.
I'll just note, oh, sorry, real quick on the date. Typically, our council meetings are on the second Thursday of the month on those, on a quarterly basis. So that would technically put us at March 11th. So I don't know, Cord, you had the 18th or for the SB 15. So I know that there's not an actual invitation out to council members. So we'll need to finalize the 11th. There have been certainly some cases where we've said, oh, maybe we're going to buy ourselves a week and we move it to the third week, or something like that. So I basically just say stay tuned, but likely the 11th. Sorry, Commissioner.
That's okay. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. Thank you, Anya, for the presentation and the reminder of the process. I wanted to just throw out an issue that I think we're going to see more of, and that is that in the context of COVID, with so many people staying home and feeling very stressed this year, I think that there has been a big uptick in alcohol use and also other recreational drugs. And I think that we are collectively not setting very good role models for our youth. And I would expect to see additional substance use disorder problems moving forward, and think we need to make sure we address that in our plan. I think with Measure 110 and decriminalization of user amounts of street drugs, that's going to become an even more challenging issue to deal with our youth. And we don't really know what Measure 110's effects are on the juvenile justice system. So it's just a big issue area. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen.
Are there any other comments or questions by the council? Okay, well, thank you for the reminder, again, for the new council members, the fact that this body of work is a very important part of our aspect. It's really helpful to hear Anya give that overview. And this is a unique moment in time where we can support the shaping of a 3-year plan and of those priorities. So if you have particular interest, I would just strongly encourage you, if you can participate on those meetings. The next one coming up, I think it was January 4th, please do so. So without further ado, let's go ahead and continue. I think, Anya, you're next up on the agenda as well for the, let's see, JCP plan.
Thank you, Celeste. Melissa, please help. Thank you so much. So as if one plan was not enough, we have another plan that we're working on. And this one is for the next biennium, and this is for the juvenile crime prevention monies that we receive from the state general fund now. So this is not federal, and I will again emphasize that we have two pots of money, if you will. One is coming from the federal government, and we just talked about it. And another one comes from our general fund from the legislature. So when Brian talked about the governor's budget, this is what goes into the governor's budget. And we have a couple of statutes that define how we plan for the money to be, and how we administer the money, and what expectations are set forward for the local jurisdictions. So and you can read, but the council provides juvenile crime prevention funds, and I did not misspeak. It's juvenile crime prevention, because later we will talk about what goes into other areas of juvenile crime prevention. To counties and tribes for programs focused on youth at risk for juvenile crime, and establishes criteria for local high-risk juvenile crime prevention plans. And the criteria include, but are not limited to, measuring changes in juvenile crime and recidivism. And it's important to remember here, because these are the high-level outcomes for juvenile crime prevention: reduction in recidivism and prevention of juvenile crime. Now, how we get to that final destination, that's what we're talking about in the planning process. The statute also requires Youth Development Council to work with tribal governments to develop tribal high-risk juvenile crime prevention plans. Now, this part of the statute is unique to the YDC, because other juvenile crime prevention funds, which are Basic and Diversion.org YA administers, and you may recall there was an earlier conversation about making some statutory changes to clean up our statute around this funding. That's what is, so initially that was like 3 sections of the funding that the administration changed over the years. But so there is no money that tribes get for the purposes of basic and diversion, but they do receive funding for prevention services from the YDC. Now, the next responsibilities of the council is to review budget and allocation formula for appropriation for the purpose of juvenile crime prevention. So these are your responsibilities. And the last responsibility, but not the least, of the council is to review the components of local high-risk juvenile crime prevention plans developed under ORS 417-855. And Melissa will take us to the next slide, please. And that's the statute that defines what goes into local high-risk juvenile plan. And I purposefully just quote statutes here to show that it's not a made-up requirement. It's actually what's in our statute, and that's what is also in more detailed explained in our agency administrative rules. So if anybody is interested, that's where it's all explained. So with the planning, what's different? Although it's allocated funding, but it comes with certain requirements, and these are the requirements for the local communities to meet our expectations, or rather statutory expectations. So each county will designate a a local agency that will lead the planning process. For the most part, it's a juvenile department in the state, with the exception in 2 counties. And the lead agency will bring a partnership together. That's an important component of the planning. A lead agency does not create the plan in the vacuum. They gather community input as well. And then they will together put together a plan, and the plan will define what type of services and activities they will be funding with JCP prevention monies. But for youth who meet a specific, who demonstrate specific risks, and you can see them here. Those are the risk factors, and I'll be more about that in a little later. So by statute, youth have to have at least 2 risk factors. Now, the next stage to that is the Youth Development Council. Now we're going back to the council responsibilities. Shall award a minimum grant to small counties. The minimum grant level shall be determined by the council through public process and reviewed by council biannually. And we will get to the budget towards the end of the presentation, but please keep it in mind. Earlier, Brian shared with you the good news that we have been held harmless in the governor's budget, but let's hope the legislature will be just as generous to us. But if not, we may have a serious conversation about what the level of a minimum grant allocation might be for the next biennium. So that's why it's an important thing to keep in mind here. And then lastly, at least from the key components of the plan, the lead agency is required to submit the plan in accordance with the planning guidelines, and that's the conversation for today. And the plans, local plans, have to be approved by local public safety coordinating councils, or in an absence of such, by county governing bodies' approval. So there's a state responsibility on one hand, and then there's a local responsibility, and ideally they need to merge. Melissa, would you mind taking us to the next slide, please? So with that, this is where it is the YDC and YDD collectively responsibility to create a set of guidelines for local communities to follow in the planning process. So this is where the Juvenile Justice Committee has a key role to play. And the Juvenile Justice Committee appointed a smaller group to take the first look at what will go into the next biennial planning. And that group was Christina, Molly, and Sam, and I. So we got together when we brainstormed what is changed in this current climate and what stayed the same, what's important as far as the statute goes, and what additional, if any, requirements we would like the local communities to meet. After we had met, we presented this at the Juvenile Justice Committee and had their input. So what you see here is a slightly updated PowerPoint presentation based on the conversations that took place earlier. So we do need to see in the elements of the plan, we want to hear or read information on local community justice needs. What are the issues, barriers, and service gaps? And we would like for people to, I didn't put it in PowerPoint, but our real message was tell your story in 400 words or less. But it should not be an exercise in creative writing. This is not a competitive grant proposal. This is basically an identification of what's happening in your community. So yeah, tell your story in your language. But we would like for people to show us and tell us how COVID-19 situation have affected them. Because I know it's a pretty common knowledge to, people commonly say, well, we're all in it together, but I would suggest to you, we're all in it together, but in different ways. And then there's wildfires that happen in the state, so they may have significant effect also on communities. And then the other things are, we want to know the demographic information. We want to know the juvenile crime trends and risk and protective factors. What will be the outcomes? Now, the required elements is also, those data pieces should come from Juvenile Justice Information System reports. That's a required element, because these reports exist. They exist on an individual county level. So to say that this information is not available, that would be an incorrect statement. Now, Sam has a great idea to include school districts information, because schools, students' attendance and engagement are important components of issues that kids may experience. We cannot necessarily require it, because I don't know if everybody will have access to them, but it certainly is encouraged. And since initially we talked about, the statute talks about the planning process should include a partnership. So these are the entities that need to be invited to the table. Government agencies, school districts, education service districts, youth, school, workforce boards, and that's in reference to Brian's earlier in part of the director report was that there a significant amount of money will likely be invested in workforce development for youth, community partners, and they need to show support for the proposed plan. Now, we have here evidence in previous funding years. People were required to have several community meetings. It's really difficult to require any specific type of gathering this time. So any evidence will do. It could be a Zoom meeting, it could be a phone call, but it's just as long as we have some kind of quote, in quotes, proof that it was not created by one person sitting at one desk in solitude. And description, now this is going to OYA, but description of how JCP basic and diversion and other funds will be used in continuum of services. So that's pretty much what we're requiring. And then Melissa, if you could please take me to the next. We also need people to explain to us what services will be funded. And what's important here is the emphasis on the JCP assessment tool. I don't know if Christina wants to support me with that, why the use of the tool is so important and how we can ensure some kind of consistency across the state.
Sure. Thank you, Anya. Yes, just briefly, one of the pillars of evidence-based practice in our field of juvenile justice is using a validated risk assessment tool. And that is critical because it's really important to identify the individual youth's criminogenic risk factors, meaning what are those factors that are driving crime, the delinquent behavior that is before us, and also to identify the areas of need for the individual youth. So in Oregon, we have been for over 20 years using a validated risk assessment tool across all 36 county juvenile departments called the Juvenile Crime Prevention Risk Assessment. And that is used, when we use that in our different programs and services, a lot of times we use it when a youth begins engagement with whatever the program is, and then when the youth completes engagement, we use it to compare if risk factors have been impacted. Hopefully, risk factors have been lowered and protective factors have been increased, which are both areas that the tool covers. So in Oregon, that's part of the foundation of what we do when we're trying to most effectively serve these young people and reduce their likelihood of continuing to be involved in our system or graduating to the adult system. So anyway, is there other parts of that you wanted me to talk about, Anya? We could talk about this all day.
I know we can, because that's really good stuff. Well, thank you, Christian. I think you helped me make the point why it's important, and why it's a fundamental requirement of the planning, both planning and implementation. Because by accepting monies from us, people commit to use the assessment tool on every youth who will be determined eligible or not for the services.
Great. And Anya, can I just clarify one piece of that? I talked about juvenile departments using them, but depending on the county and how the plan has been developed, it is possible that contracted community-based service providers are also using the tools. So just to give an example, in Clackamas County, we use our prevention money for a diversion program that's operated by Latino Network. Latino Network has been trained in how to use the tool, and they are the ones who are actually using the tool with the kids that are involved in the diversion program. So I don't want to make it sound like it's only juvenile department staff. It depends on the community and how the program has been designed in that particular community.
Thank you so much for that. And that's perfect segue into the YDD data manager. If a lead agency in the planning process identifies that services will be provided by a community partner that will be serving kids who have not been formally referred to the juvenile department, then the assessment data on these kids will be entered into YDD data manager, which creates a shield between juvenile record and not having a juvenile record. So we still collect this information, but the kids who are receiving community-based services are not classified, if you will, as juvenile justice kids. So that's an important part of that. And there are two versions of the instrument. The one that's slightly different. One is used by the juvenile departments and information goes into JJs. And the other is used by community providers and information goes into data manager. However, we merge those two data sets for the purpose of evaluation, and that's when MPC Research will create a report showing the changes in risk and protective factors. and also whether and also recidivism or crime, because they're, by matching the two sets, we track the kids for 12 months in the JHS, and our hope is not to see them there. So there is no either new referral or first referral after receiving the JCP services. And I'm sorry if I'm giving you way too much information, but I will try to wrap it up like right away. So I have 2 more slides. Melissa, please. Thank you. And this is what goes into the planning. The population to be served, we collect demographic information diligently. The tool is designed to collect it. Legal status, nothing to do with immigration. It's whether kids are offenders, meaning there was a formal referral to juvenile justice system, or non-offenders, which is community-based. So please do not confuse with immigration status, nothing to do with that. Risk level is measured by the assessment tool, referral process, who referred youth to the services, and we capture the referral process because it does not have to be law enforcement, and for the most part it's not. It could be school, it could be parents, it could be just about anybody. And we do want to know an estimated number of youth to be served. And here was the evidence-based practice and cultural appropriateness. I would like to ask Molly to help me out a little bit, also to emphasize the importance of it. And the reason I'm asking Christina and Molly to help me, for one thing, they're it's not even arguably, like the most experienced juvenile professionals in the state, and they have been party to the development of many of the checklists, the assessment tools. So please, Molly, if you don't mind helping me out here.
I would be glad to help you out on the evidence-based practice tool. It came out of Senate Bill 267 back in 2009, 2011. And it's just a really great way of kind of going through and making sure that when communities are looking at practices, they're going through a process of just kind of scoping out what they're able to do and why they're doing it. And truly, it's one of the things that I'm really proud of in Oregon is that the Juvenile Crime Prevention Assessment that we started back 20 years ago really has become the kind of core evidence-based tool that we all use. And Christina talked about it in the beginning around the criminogenic risk and how to impact the criminogenic, meeting the youth's criminogenic needs reduces their risk for ongoing involvement in the juvenile justice system. And so here in Oregon, the time that we've put into doing that, and we had a team go to Georgetown and bring back and work on validating and making it reliable again. So that really is the tool that we're looking at creating and staying with the evidence-based practice back from a long time ago. Does that help at all, Anya?
It does. Thank you, Molly. But I would like to also add that the tool, the assessment checklist that we created, it also allows for evidence-based practices, and there's an important.
Absolutely, sorry, Anya. I was lumping it all together. I apologize. It allows for evidence-based practices, practice-based evidence, and also it allows for cultural-based practices. And so tribal communities weighed in a lot to make the checklist really applicable to them as well. Thank you for reminding me about that.
So, and that was in an effort to meet the statutory requirement of evidence-based practice, but at the same time to allow local communities to implement services that make sense to them while have some fundamental scientific and research-based foundation. And practice-based evidence, it's another way of saying do something innovative, collect your evidence, and then see where it will take us. And we're also adding cultural strategies, making sure that what you're implementing works for minority communities. And especially if you have identified some disparities in your data analysis, because remember the first requirement was show us your data, then what are your strategies to mitigate the disparities we have found? And what we're adding this year, which we haven't done before, is how does the service provide information and support LGBTQ youth and gender diverse youth? And that takes us to the last and final slide at this point, and this is just budget and timeline. So this is FYI to you. Our minimum grant is established at $60,000, which is the current funding level. The total allocation is about, well, $5.5 million to counties and $540,000 to tribes. The budget allocation formula for the next biennium will be developed by YDD, and allocation, what I mean here by allocation is it's a population-based formula, so there might be some changes to the current level as it allocates to each of the jurisdictions, because possibly the youth population data changed from the previous biennium. Maybe they haven't, but maybe they have. And this is where, again, OYA comes in play. We will be using the same population base as they do for their basic and diversion funding, so there is no discrepancy between how we allocate these things. However, the minimum grant allocation for smaller counties and tribes, that's determination of a different kind. It's based on how much total funding is available. Now, for our timeline, we'll plan to release the guidelines by Monday. And what I just shared with you, this is what will go into the guidelines, but in a more user-friendly way. Well, just basically a set of questions. There'll be nothing more, nothing less, unless you tell me otherwise at the end of my little presentation here. We accept the plans to be submitted. Again, now this is a firm date. This is not an imaginary date or anticipated date. This is going to be March 31st. And the plans should be ready for approval by YDC on June 10th. Because remember, going back to our initial statute, it will be the YDC, the Youth Development Council, who will need to approve the plans. Now, with that, I will conclude my presentation, and I'm sorry if I went over time. Are there any questions? And again, primarily it will be the Juvenile Justice Committee who will be doing the review of the plans when they come in. We will also solicit help from other state agencies, as we've done in the past. OYA, by all means, because they're part of that continuum of services as well. We've also traditionally asked Criminal Justice Commission to participate, since the approval by local public safety coordinating councils is a required element. Am I forgetting somebody? And of course, SAMCO. SAMCO has been a wonderful partner from education for years and years and years.
Anya, thank you for giving us that overview. Again, really helpful, and this is a good reminder that we will have quite a bit of strategic plans to approve going forward in the future, both the last one and the one by the counties. And that if this is an interest to you, that January 4th meeting is the same meeting that would be nice for you to go to, that would be helpful. Are there any questions by the council? Any questions or comments? Or by any members of the committee? No? Okay. Thank you very much, Anya. I appreciate your expertise and you leading us through this important work. Thank you.
Thank you, Celeste. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, we're at 12:15, and the last item on the agenda is committee reports, and after that we will end with public comment. I'd like to start by just asking how much time we anticipate people will have for their various items on the committee report. I know that Karen does have a bit of a longer report in the strategic planning, and we have a slide to share, so we're trying to make sure that we give enough time to that committee. Jeff mentioned on workforce development, it might take 2 minutes or so. We can do pretty quick. The youth committee, Maricela, how long do you anticipate the youth committee report out will need to be?
Hi, good afternoon. This is Sanji. I will be doing the youth committee report.
Great.
3 to 5 minutes at most.
Okay, great, wonderful. Okay, so 3 to 5 minutes. And then the last committee is the Juvenile Justice Committee, and we just heard a lot. I don't know, Molly, is there any other additional? Okay, nothing. All right, great. Well, let's go ahead and go, we'll work up into the strategic planning one so that Karen, we can give you as much time as possible. So Jeff, I know you said it was 2 minutes or less. Let's go ahead and get, oh, sure, Karen, yes.
I will just need 5 to 10 minutes. I'm going to try to be quick.
Okay, wonderful, great. Okay, Jeff, go ahead.
Okay, thanks, Celeste. The reason the Workforce and Reengagement Committee can go so quickly is because Jared and Paul and Cord have done such a great job and included notes that were sent out from our November 12th meeting. And in there, you will find a lot of conversation about the re-engagement grants. And so that's all behind us now because we just gave away almost $4 million. We didn't give it away. Applicants earned that investment from our efforts. There are a couple things that I hope committee members would look at and council members would look at from the notes. The first one is a conversation we had around inviting guests to come present to the committee, and a little bit of consternation that we were feeling around what that invitation process looked like, and not wanting to have a conflict of interest or seemingly preferential connectivity to a particular grant applicant or grantee at that time. We don't need to solve that here, but I just want everyone on the council to know that that's a dialogue that started in the Workforce and Reengagement Committee. And I think that Cord and Paul and Jared had a good solution to it. And I'm hoping in a meeting in the future, we can kind of come around to some guidelines that help guide not only the council, but every committee working in council. So with that, if anyone has questions, we can answer them, but the committee notes that I think Jared or Jared and Paul put together are really solid.
Thank you, Jeff. I look forward to that conversation. We have a really wonderful challenge as a part of the YDC. We saw it earlier, and that it's very important that we have voices from communities, and we hear from communities, and we ourselves belong to those communities. And at the same time, we have to navigate the conflict of interest and make sure that we do so in ways that is in line with Oregon law, and that we don't set up any situations that might feel might have different understandings for different people. So I appreciate that, and we look forward to that conversation. Jeff, did you have anything else? Nope. Okay, great, wonderful. Sanji, I believe you were going to talk about the youth committee.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you, Celeste. To acknowledge the youth committee and its chair, Maricela Ortega Guzman, and the other members are Ms. Aisha Berry, Diana Rojas, and Destiny Ortiz. I see Maricela. Are any of the other young ladies present in the meeting? I see Diana. Hi, Diana. And I see Aisha too, and I see Destiny. Great. Everyone is here. Since our last YDC committee meeting, I was afforded the extreme honor of being assigned to be the new staff liaison for the youth committee. And I had the opportunity to meet with the young ladies prior to the pandemic when we were going to be planning for an activity that they would be overseeing. And unfortunately, because of the pandemic, those plans have been put on hold. But I was able to just take in their brilliance and learn that each of them are truly phenomenal women who are just doing amazing things. And I'm honored to have the opportunity to work with them again. I also get to live vicariously through their youth and vigor, because I think at this point I'm a little bit officially over the hill. So the quote that Brian mentioned earlier was from the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, State Relations and Assistant Division National Training Conference, which was held November 16th through November 18th. And many of us attended that, and one of the focuses in that conference was about youth engagement, and specifically as it relates to state advisory groups and the young people who are on those groups. And unfortunately, due to extenuating circumstances, the youth committee was scheduled to meet in November, but we had to postpone it. So we are in progress of rescheduling that meeting. So we look forward to having a robust committee report at the next council meeting in March. But a few things that I did want to point out. What Brian shared is something that was stated at one of the conference breakout sessions, which was nothing about us without us. And I hope that all the council members recognize and acknowledge, which I'm sure that you do, that even though they are a little bit younger in age and may not have as much life experience, they still bring as much wealth and of knowledge and ideas and brilliance to the table as each of you, and they are underway to make some of the progress that many of you have made due to just time and experience. But one thing that was highlighted is that we have to continue to acknowledge these as our peers and know that they are our equals. And even though we refer to them as young adults, they are still equal partners in this work. And I hope to be able to implement at some point a mentorship program so that those of you who have had the opportunity of time and experience and wisdom through your journeys to be able to share some of those and help guide these young ladies and whoever may be new youth young adult members of the committee. And I wanted to share something with Zan and Anya. We do have our first charge ladies. As you heard, we are going to be trying to develop how we can connect and get feedback from young adults. And Paul Sell and I had the opportunity to work on a young adult health outcome survey with the Oregon Health Authority. And we were instrumental in the development of the actual survey itself. And the survey is now going through their internal approval process. And then they have also awarded the contract to a vendor. And one of the things that they're going to be doing to try to reach this population, and their focus population was 18 to 21, is to use text messaging and Instagram to disseminate the survey. And so I hope that we can keep that in mind. Some of these things will require time and cost, but I'll definitely be willing to be a liaison between OHA to determine if that's something that we could possibly do in order to reach young people, because we know that social media is probably the top way to do so. And Zan, one thing that I was very adamant about being an advocate for, because we unfortunately know that there are comorbidities between mental health and substance abuse and entry into the juvenile justice system. And so Paul had the opportunity to provide excellent knowledge and expertise to have questions focused toward education, but I was able to get some questions in about mental health, illicit substance use, and involvement in the juvenile justice system in general. So we will be a part of the disaggregation of that data once the survey is returned. So definitely hope to be able to share it with our division and our council so that we can utilize that data to see some of the work that we may move forward in. So thank you all. And again, if the ladies have anything that they would like to add, please do so. But I look forward to the opportunity to just be kind of a fly on the wall. I'm just going to be a facilitator and a catalyst to help them come up with the amazing and brilliant ideas that I know that they are capable of. Thank you all very much. And ladies, do you all have anything you would like to share?
Thank you, Sanji, for that update. This is Maricela. I just wanted to say that, you know, because of COVID and everything going on, we have not had the chance to meet. So we're kind of feeling a little like detached from each other. So hopefully moving forward, we'll have an opportunity to meet. And, yeah. But yeah, I'm happy to see all of your guys' faces and happy to continue this work.
I was muted. Hey, thank you, Sanji. I'm going to echo what Maricela said. I'm excited. You know, we were already planning an event, and so I'm just excited to pick up where we left off and to reunite and connect regardless of the pandemic.
And I just wanted to, this is ICT here, I just wanted to say a lot of thanks to Sanji. She's been very helpful, even with us not having face-to-face meetings. She's been very helpful with checking in and just supporting us in other ways and keeping us intact with what's happening in the council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Having your voice here is really important. And to that end too, if there are parts of the agenda that are helpful to go over before or ways that I can support you as chair, please let me know. Okay, we now have the last committee who's going to report out. So Karen's going to talk with us about the strategic planning work. Karen, welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I want to thank all of the members of the Strategic Planning Committee. It's been a long effort and we've had a lot of meetings throughout the pandemic, but we've made a lot of progress. Melissa's going to share a slide deck. I will not go over every slide in detail in the interest of time, but we are planning to share it with you after this session. So at our last Strategic Planning Committee meeting, which is the next slide, Melissa, we adopted our mission, vision, and values. Since then, we've done a lot of work on priorities. What are the priorities that flow from this mission, vision, and values? We're still working on those priorities, and that would be the next slide, Melissa. Great. And excuse my late night formatting last night, but we started with originally 3 priorities, and now we have what I would call 4 and an asterisk, or possibly 5 priorities under draft consideration. They are identify systemic problems, advance solutions, and support structural reforms, promote policies and partnerships that expand and leverage resources, achieve strategic outcomes through grant making that supports youth-centered pathways and practices and affirms identity and safety, and then strengthen YDD, YDC communication and awareness capacity to achieve priorities, goals, and measurable outcomes. And then the asterisk priority was more of an internal one, and that is continuing to strengthen YDD, YDC cohesion and inclusion to achieve priorities, goals, and measurable outcomes. So that's where we stand now. Those could be tweaked, adjusted over time. And what we need to do next, besides finalizing the priorities, is really think about the strategies or tactics that we are going to apply for these priorities. And that leads to the next slide. Melissa, thank you. And our goal is to have a draft of the strategic plan document by March, which means that we have to do a lot of heavy lifting at the beginning of the year. So what we are going to be asking of our committee chairs is to actually meet with your committee members, talk about the priorities, think about strategies and tactics, and we will be giving you more guidance on this, but I wanted to give you a heads up so that you are not surprised come January. If you want to start thinking about potential meeting dates now so that you can have them on the books and you can kind of hit the ground running kind of mid to late January, early February, that is fine too. So what we do plan on doing is having the committees do work before we have a retreat in February. Ideally, we come out with what I would call 80% of the plan at the retreat so that we have 95 to 99% done in March. And I know that is very aggressive and Brian's probably going, whoa, that's a lot. But that would be the ideal. And, you know, if we hit it, great. If not, there's more that we can do. That would be the ideal. So it means a lot of heavy lifting in January and February to be ready by March. And then the next slide, number 5 there. So that just the next steps outlines that. We do have a retreat subcommittee that will be meeting on December 16th. I had hoped that it would be a half-hour meeting, but it looks like it will likely be an hour. But you know me, I will try to get you out as fast as I possibly can because I spend all day on Zoom and I always appreciate it when a Zoom meeting ends early. So that will be the goal. So at the retreat subcommittee meeting, we will be just planning how we can get the year kicked off right and how we can help our committee chairs prepare so we head into the retreat with all the information that we need. And that is my report. I want to thank Cord because I basically cribbed every slide that he ever did for the committee to put this together. So thank you, Cord, and thank you, committee members. And if anybody else wants to chime in, feel free.
Thanks, Karen. I appreciate your leadership on the strategic planning process. I'm also just hearing a lot of things are coming down the pike, and that our March meeting is going to have quite a bit that we're going to need to cover. So I just thought maybe for the YDD team, we might want to finalize a date right away. And it sounds like this is not going to be a short meeting, so we probably want to block out most of the day for that meeting.
Celeste, can I chime in?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm just gonna say, let's go with the 18th, not the 11th, so we have another week of time to get ourselves ready. And I'll just really quickly say, it is clear to me that that we have like multiple planning processes, not to mention multiple agenda items, multiple planning processes happening. And on the one hand, I think my mind might explode, but it's also this opportunity to find ways that these things align and thread. So I think that the strategic planning ideally provides kind of a overarching sort of framework, and whether it's a framework or it's a foundation, pick whatever visual or metaphor works for you, but that then these other plans can sort of help identify particular threads, pathways, strategies. I don't know what the right word is, but I know that I'm not saying it was necessarily on purpose, but the timing, I hope and think, can allow for some integration, right? So that these things are connected. We don't want things siloed and disconnected, but we also know that there are specific directions or pieces within each of those plans. But I think they can all, find some kind of a home within the larger strategic plan. So.
Awesome. And Brian, sorry, did you mention to the February date and just to hold that.
I didn't mention it, you know, oh, for the retreat?
Yeah, exactly. It'd be nice just to remind council members because we're done with committee reports now, and I just want to make sure they flag that.
Yeah, I don't, frankly, actually, no, I'm not, I don't think we've set
The actual date.
an actual date. And, you know, if we want to, yeah, that I think is going to require some kind of a, whatever, doodle poll or something. We might think if we can think about like that second week of February. I can't remember, there's some holidays in there, but like a Thursday or Friday, it's probably like a Thursday afternoon and a Friday morning, or maybe it's 2 mornings. I'm guessing it'll be kind of a 6 to 8 hour-ish time frame, but over 2 days. I know folks have other meetings and other responsibilities, and so we need to get more specific, but ideally, yeah, we dedicate like a significant portion of time over a couple of days. And if council members can let Melissa know, even in the chat or by an email, like what days are not good in February, like, oh, I've got this 2-day thing I'm doing, and we're not going to be able to meet everybody's needs, but it'd be good for us to have some understanding probably on what are just for you as a council member. And remember, this is council and staff, but if there are dates that like just you can't make it, and we can at least have that as we think about dates.
Thank you. Okay, great. We have finished committee reports. Hour.
Oh, I think we all froze there. Celeste, can you restate that?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I just wanted, before we move on to public comment, I wanted to ask if there were any questions or comments from council members regarding any of the committee report outs that we've just heard. Okay. So at this time, the last item on the agenda are public comments. Melissa, do we have anyone who signed up to give a comment?
Let's check in with Lindsay. I think folks were going to chat.
Oh, right. Yes. Sorry, Lindsay.
And I haven't received any. Lindsay, have you?
I just came back in. Somebody was at my door. What was the question?
We're now at the time for public comment. If anybody would like public comment, you can go ahead and mention your name or type your name in the chat box. Lindsay, has anyone contacted you yet to they'd like to give a public comment? Okay, I'm just gonna wait for a second and give anyone who's on the phone an opportunity. What we usually do is just ask you to share your name. Okay, great. It looks like we have one person who would like to do public comment. If anyone else does, we'll just go in order. We usually limit the number of minutes. I can't remember if it's 2 or if it's 3. Melissa, will you help me there? And you have an opportunity to then say whatever you'd like to for that time period. We'll go through and invite anyone else who'd like to talk, and then after that, we'll close the meeting. So it looks like we have one person, 3 minutes. Okay, thank you, Sandy. So Rayona, I hope I'm saying your name right. I'd like to welcome you to the Youth Development Council and provide you 3 minutes to share whatever you'd like to.
Thank you. My name is Yana Amadi, and I want to say thank you very much for allowing me this space to share such wonderful information. So I just wanted to bring forth Empowering People by Holding Hands, Inc. is a nonprofit organization that is very, very new to the community. However, with hopes of being a resource for a lot of our youth and young adults within the sex trafficking and gang violence atmosphere. So with the goal is to provide intervention and prevention services, emergency respite care, alcohol and drug substance abuse treatments and or supports, also mental health resources and supports as well. A lot of that right now just consists of referrals within the community with other partners, as we currently do not have any funding and looking for funding. We are just being resourceful with what we do have. So the goal is to assign advocates to the youth or young adults while they're in JDH and removing some of those barriers that are causing them to become either institutionalized or repeating the same thing as far as generational obstacles, whether if it's drugs and alcohol, violence, sex trafficking, obviously gangs, affiliation and relations. And hopefully we can see a huge drop in some of the numbers. If you all are unaware, there has been another shooting between some youth where one was, ended fatal, a terminal death, and the other one is in critical condition, which has brought forth more of my motivation to do as much as I can within the community with our youth and young adults, primarily getting an advocate assigned to the youth while they're incarcerated within the juvenile detention center or either out in the community. It's not that hard to sign up for services, just word of mouth, parental rights, parents, guardians, whoever, but essentially I'd like to see advocates reach out to the youth while they're either in JDH, if we can do some outreach while they're in the streets, wherever, and being able to have the point where we can actually assign them and that person stay with them during the entire duration while they're receiving services. So if they need help with advocating and networking within the justice system, or whether if it's school and needing supports with, you know, anything of that nature while they're incarcerated, our goal is to be able to help them establish goals, to look at SMART goals, identify what those are and how we can go about achieving those goals. And so having that one person to be able to help them throughout their duration with us, ages between 11 and 26. And it is culturally specific, although we hold all cultures in high regards. And so our doors are open to any and all. As we are right now, very new, as I said before, I'm currently looking for volunteers that are willing to either sit on the board and hold a chair there, or either volunteer their services elsewhere in regards to advocacy or the program development. I did put the website down in the comment section. I am the founder of this nonprofit organization. This is my baby. I believe that children are our future and the young adults. And if we can just help and jump in, roll our sleeves up and get down and dirty at the beginning of their lives, we can kind of help with to nip it in the bud and see the outcome as to when they get older. So I'm a little nervous, so you have to forgive me. I really wasn't, as much as I tried to prepare for this quick 3 minutes, I was still unprepared. I feel as though, because I'm trying to spill out so much information in such a little bit of time, but if anyone, I'm definitely asking and holding everyone accountable, especially since we have come through such a triumphant moment with, you know, Black Lives Matter and being able to see that we are holding all people in high regard. So I just want to let everyone know, if you are interested in volunteering, please get a hold of me. My email is my first name, last initial, @Empowering People, PPL abbreviated, by holdinghands.com. And the website is www.empoweringpeoplebyholdinghands, and that's people spelled out .org. So please, I'm telling everyone, put your money where your mouth is and let's see people volunteer and help. I mean, I need as much all hands on deck as possible. Thank you very much for your time. I'm open for questions if there are any.
Thank you very much for sharing with us. And I appreciate you sharing your contact information. And usually we don't have questions and comments on the public council, but this, I think we just have one person. And so I just want to say, does anyone have a quick question or comment before we close the meeting for our speaker?
I would just ask if Rihanna could put her contact information in the chat.
In the chat, great.
For us to capture it, and just appreciate your taking the time to present today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, yes.
You covered it up.
Okay, at this point, I believe there's no other members of the public who'd like to comment? We haven't heard from anyone at this point. And I think we are done with the agenda. So there's a lot of work that will happen between now and March 18th. Please all where a lot of the important work will continue. At this point, thank you all. I think we can officially close the meeting of the Youth Development Council in December 2020. This has been a great, very productive meeting. I appreciate you all. Thanks for spending this time with us. And you have 15 minutes back in your life to run and get some food before your 1 o'clock meeting begins.
Thanks, Council.
Everybody.
Thanks, thanks, Chair Celeste.
Thank you.
Thanks, public. Thanks, Rana.